So, hey everybody, how's it going? Thanks for stopping by again. Hope you're all doing well on this Wednesday evening. For those new, for those just stopping by to a stream for the first time, we do these streams 8 p.m. every Wednesday, 8 Eastern. Usually go to about 10 to 10:30, talking about this week in politics, Canadian politics, American politics, all sorts of stuff. Often my wife Brianna co-hosts these streams. She'll probably stop by briefly at some point, but she's currently doing a work call of her own, so she's dealing with that on her end. So we will have her here as soon as possible. Normally what we do is we focus largely on taking your questions, seeing where people want to take the discussion, the debate, the discourse, if you will, and then going on from there. But some things we could talk about is Biden continuing to be an awful candidate and even worse human being. We could talk about how workers are being sacrificed on the altar of capitalism, in the US especially, but also in Canada, especially in Alberta, where a meat plant where over half the workers got sick has now been reopened, even though no one thinks that's a good idea. We could talk about Bernie getting back on the ballot in New York. I know it's likely not going to make a huge difference, but it's the principle that's good to see. I wrote a new piece in Passage, a kind of left-wing version, Canadian version of Jacobin. We could talk about that. Lots of things to discuss. One thing people have been saying, somebody noted on Facebook, I don't think I'll do it tonight because I want to get the setup right. But people would like me to do a political compass test. I know Kyle Kalinske did one live, and so we could do the political compass test here. Maybe I'll do that at some point. Maybe if people are interested in that, I'll either do it on a future live stream or I'll do like a bonus live stream, for that. So let me know what you think about that. John Barlich says, hey, how you doing? John, I'm doing great. Things are going well. For those who don't follow me on Twitter and Facebook, if you don't follow me on Twitter and Facebook, follow me on Twitter and Facebook. But I just finished 4 hours of radio interviews today here in Canada on the CBC, the kind of the Canadian version of NPR, if you will. I did 14 different interviews today on the current health crisis and how workers are being asked to go back to work and how it may not be safe for them to do so, and what rights workers have and don't have in terms of resisting unsafe workplaces. So if you want to talk a bit about that, we can certainly do that. So I'm a bit tired, but I'm already in the zone because I did those interviews. August was saying just before we started, Nina Turner is doing an interview with Tim Black. I would say stick with me, but I hopefully that we could talk a bit about that at some point. I think Nina Turner, let me know what you guys think, but Nina Turner and Brianna Joy Gray have only become better since Bernie Sanders has dropped out, right? Like Bernie Sanders, like some of the people on the Bernie campaign have come off awful. Chuck Rocha, Jeff Weaver, some of these folks have gone full in on the super PACs and full in on Biden. And I get endorsing Biden. I disagree. I get it. But I totally don't get like selling your soul for Joe Biden of all people. But then on the other end, you have Nina Turner and Brianna Joy Gray, like being able to speak for themselves in a way they weren't before. And I'm not suggesting Bernie was censoring them or silencing them. But, the reality is that when you're part of a big political campaign, there are certain limitations on what you can and can't say. Like you censor yourself, even if you're not told to. And now that they're free, God, every time I see Brianna, especially, I see Bri on Twitter more. I don't know if it's just my circles, but every time I see her on Twitter, I'm like, my God, she don't miss. She's just wrecking centrists, calling out Democrat hypocrisy. Like, my goodness, Brianna has to run for office at some point. Like, she has to make a run herself because she is fantastic. I don't know, like, when's the right time for her, things like that, but that's something we want to see. Environmental Canadian says, hey, how you doing, Environmental? Great to see you. Thanks for stopping by. We could talk a little bit about the Elizabeth May claim oil is dead. That was an interesting claim that the Greens and the Bloc both said today. And NDP guy, but unlike the media, I give credit where credit is due. And it was really interesting of them to say that. I know that it's a controversial idea in Canada, especially because primary resources are such a big part of our economy. We're very dependent. For Americans who are watching, the cult of oil in Canada is way stronger than it is in the US even. Because you guys have a lot of oil, but Canada as a proportion of our economy is like we sell like oil and natural gas and things like that. And so the politics of criticizing fossil fuels in Canada is in some ways even harder than in the US because it's such a big part of who we are as a proportion of our economy. And Alberta is sort of like Texas, but unlike Texas, it has less going for it outside of oil. It doesn't have like the new Silicon Valley that Texas is building. So talking about environmentalism here. John Bartlett says, hey, you heard about Bernie being on the ballot? John, yeah, for sure. I noted that in a video last night on the channel. I think it's great. I think it was great that Andrew Yang launched that challenge. I think it was fantastic to see, Bernie and his volunteers and people mobilized there. It's not, Biden's still going to win that primary, right? I don't think that's going to change. But it's the principle. It's about Bernie getting the delegates he deserves. It's about the down ballot races. And it's just about like regular people winning one. Like Bernie dropped out and a lot of us disagreed with how he did it. Like he dropped out really early. He didn't get anything in exchange necessarily. And the only thing Bernie asked for really was, I want to be on all the ballots going forward. I want to continue to win delegates. And Biden was okay with that. This actually wasn't Biden's doing. And then like DNC hacks in New York, dumped all over that. Like for no reason. Right? And it was like such a dumb move. So I'm glad that was fixed. 100%. Thanks again, John, for the support and the great question. Joseph Mangano is reminding people, don't forget to like the video. Apparently, it really helps when you like and you comment and interact on the live stream. It shows YouTube that this is a cool, fun, rad, totally awesome, bodacious stream. So if you guys can click the like button, that would be greatly appreciated. Samantha Sider saying, withhold your consumption to strike back at Capitol. I mean, I don't think that's necessarily a bad idea. It's challenging, right? Because we're all so disconnected. But, in a sense, working people can gain power by withholding. We often think of that as like direct union strikes, like workers not going to work, either because it's unsafe or because the job conditions are poor or they don't make enough money or whatever. But, rent strikes, consumer strikes, some of these are more effective than others, but I think working people should not leave that tool off the table. Or, they shouldn't leave it on the table because they should be prepared to use it. That might be the wrong analogy. I'm tired. But Samantha, you're 100% right that finding ways to withhold, especially from companies that are profiting unjustly from the crisis, especially companies that are demanding workers go back to work when it's not safe. Like we should use our power in that sense. If there's a company in your area and you that's doing this, if there's a business that's making workers go back to work when it's not safe, use your money to protest that as much as is possible. K Fresh says Bernie dropped out and not getting back into the race and now endorsing Joe Biden. Yeah, no, certainly. Look, I'm not going to overplay Bernie being on the ballot. Bernie technically he didn't drop out. Bernie suspended his campaign. But you're right, he ended his campaign and he endorsed Joe Biden. And so him being on the ballot likely isn't going to make him the nominee. But it's about the principle that if you were a Bernie donor, volunteer, campaigner, whatever, staffer in New York, you've earned the right to vote for him. And let's also be real. In the very rare circumstance that Joe Biden ends up passing away or dropping out and it goes to a convention, then delegates are going to matter. And if Bernie Sanders is if Bernie gets denied the right to earn some delegates, it will make it almost impossible for him to win a contested convention. It might be impossible with the neoliberals united anyway, But if Bernie wouldn't be allowed to earn any delegates in New York and all the rest of the states going forward, he would be at a even bigger disadvantage. So it might matter, but that's a fantasy. That's a fantasy, but we can always dream. Pivowitz, sorry, I don't know if I'm saying that right. Says, are people having issues getting Cobra coverage like unemployment? I'm not an American. I assume that's a major issue, but I'm glad. Hopefully, people can help each other in the chat and facilitate that discussion. I think that's certainly something to look at. John, with a fantastic question. Hey, what are things that America does better than Canada? Well, a lot of this is going to be opinion-based. I mean, if you're a rich person, the United States offers a lot Canada doesn't. Like housing in much of the country is cheaper. And like expensive Canadian cities are sometimes not as expensive as American cities. Like New York is very expensive and San Francisco is very expensive. But like you can buy way nicer houses in towns in pretty major cities in the US than you can in Toronto. So if you're relatively well off, things can be pretty sweet in the United States. So taking care of its rich, the United States is maybe better than Canada. Other things the US does better. The US does a better job at, with this crisis, they've done a really bad job at actually implementing it. But their plan gave $1,200 to everyone, whereas Canada's plan actually excluded the very, very poorest. So if the United States actually implemented its plan well, then it could have been better for the very, very poorest in the Canadian plan. Didn't end up working like that. Other people will say the United States is better because it's, cost of living can be cheaper. That's true, but it's often based on lower labor standards, like lower wages. So, you have a more valuable dollar, but even besides that, like food is cheaper in the States, right? So it could be a bit more expensive to live in Canada, in many places because we have higher labor standards. We're a bit more spread out. We have a lower population density, so costs are higher in Canada as well. So that's something, again, it's a value judgment. Our healthcare is better for most people. But again, if you're very, very wealthy, you might prefer American healthcare. If you have gold-plated insurance, because, you're effectively cutting off the poor from getting care and siphoning all that value to the well-off. And so they get really good care. Rich Americans get great healthcare, better than probably rich Canadians do. Unless rich Canadians go to the United States, which they sometimes do. Uber Comrade says, why are you always wrong? You were wrong about federal elections in Canada. You were wrong about Bernie, and you're wrong about this election. Embarrassing. I trust you. Well, I mean, Uber, I'm very sorry. I'm always wrong. Although I think if you go back to my general federal election call, that I was wrong in some of the seat proportions, but I was ultimately correct in calling a liberal minority government where the NDP would, in at least a partial sense, hold the balance of power. And I was right about that. I underestimated the NDP seats, but based on the polling as it existed, my claim was not unreasonable. If the NDP did end up getting 17 or 18 or 19, as the polling aggregate suggested, they likely would have ended up with another 10 or so seats. They likely would have won a seat in Saskatoon or Regina. They likely would have won a couple close seats in British Columbia. Maybe a couple of the seats in Montreal, and maybe Ruth Ellen Brosseau could have been flipped back to the NDP. If those polling numbers were more correct, there would have been a stronger NDP. Or if the Liberal numbers were a little bit lower, no one could have predicted the vote imbalance being as strong as it was for the Conservatives, which meant that the Liberals were even stronger in Toronto than we expected. So I don't think my claims were inaccurate based on the information I had. Otherwise, I would have just been making stuff up. Was I wrong about Bernie? To a certain degree, I was. I was wrong about Bernie, but I thought my claims were correct given what we knew. Craig has a great question here. And Craig, thanks for moderating and for all your support of the channel. It looks like because of COVID-19, we've already been demonetized, guys. So we're just going to say coronavirus and COVID-19. There's going to be long-term shifts to remote work across several sectors. Is that a threat to the social relations that underpin unions and the labor movement? I mean, to a certain degree, potentially, but I mean, how often do unions meet in person? And how many people go to those meetings? I'm not so sure that that's going to have a massive, massive effect. I mean, I don't know. And I mean, let's be clear, a lot of unionized workplaces are going back to work, right? Like they shouldn't be, but the Cargill plant, they're going back to work. And those are unionized workers with UFCW. And so unions are playing a role in both distancing workspaces, but also within, physical workspaces. I'm not sure how that's going to play out. I think in some ways, if I'm being honest, as somebody who just works from home and basically has for the most part for years, when I wasn't specifically teaching, I do a lot of my research alone, either in a library, an archive, or at home. I think I feel a little bit more connected to what's going on. I stopped when I was in high school and university, like undergrad, I would sometimes watch the nightly news, but with like modern news now, you don't watch the national nightly news as much. But in this crisis, I've been watching the national pretty much either watching it the night or the next morning. And I have to say that like I wouldn't do that before. So I feel in some ways more connected, and I feel like a lot of people are paying more attention to the news and one another. I'm not saying that's going to manifest in working class solidarity, but I think people are in some ways connected by this shared experience in a way we weren't before. John Bartlett says, will Biden drop out? John, odds are no. I'm not saying it's a 0%, but odds are he won't. He thinks he's on course to win the nomination. He's the only one actively campaigning. He could clinch the delegate amounts. He should drop out because he's a bad candidate, and because of what he did to Tara Reade, should end his career in any just society. But he might not drop out. And I don't think he's going to. It'd be more likely for like the party to behind the scenes, get him in a room, basically, get him on a Zoom chat and say, Joe, like, whether you've clinched or not, you are awful and we have to turf you. For the good of the party, we're going to do a backroom coup against you. And maybe that will get rid of him. But I don't think he's just going to drop out under his own volition. Aspie for Peace says, ODSP discretionary funds extended to July. That's great to hear. I mean, the money ODSP folks, other folks that have depended on Ontario Works, ODSP, other disability and social assistance payments has been exposed as woefully inadequate. We all knew they were bad, but like in Canada, just as a reference, not everyone gets it, but a lot of people have been getting a $2,000 a month payment if they've been unable to work. But a lot of people on disability, or a lot of people that like were on long-term, like were on welfare or social assistance, got like half that amount. And so if what people need to survive is $2,000 a month, which is what people are getting if they're unemployed because of the coronavirus, then why have poor people, the poorest people, the most vulnerable people, why have they been asked to survive on nothing for generations now? In Ontario, ODSP has been terrible since at least the mid-1990s. I don't know if it was good before, but it was severely reduced, and basically it stagnated since the mid-1990s under both liberal and conservative governments provincially. Uber Comrade says Brianna Joy Gray is a total clown. Disagree. Hard disagree. You can make fun of me, but stay away from Brie Brie. Johnny Guillotine says food scarcity begins in September. I'm not an expert on that. I've heard some discussions of food scarcity. On the one hand, we are entering like the food producing season. On the other, there are issues in Canada. A lot of our agricultural work are done by seasonal workers that come from the Caribbean, a lot of them. And they have been able to come. They're still allowed to come. But their work in some ways has been restricted by social distancing guidelines. And because when they come to Canada, they have to isolate for 14 days. They can't work for 14 days. So, in some ways, it's very much remains to be seen how the food supply will be affected. And in both Canada and the United States, you've seen outbreaks at meat processing plants. And because these plants are so conglomerated and centralized, there really is a chance that, big parts of like the meat supply system, like choke points in the meat supply system, could be shut down or even slowed down. And so, this could happen. On the other end, because capitalism makes no sense, of course, you have gluts of food, right? You have gluts of food. Milk being dumped by the thousands of gallons. Potatoes rotting because restaurants aren't selling fries. So we have tons of food. It's just capitalism is not efficiently allocating resources. Guy Julian says, no notification, thanks YouTube, good thing you're regular. Now, I won't defend YouTube too often, but there's one thing I found out, and you might notice this when you have a high volume channel, like especially one like the Young Turks that post does like a dozen videos a day some days. YouTube, I believe, will only send out 3 notifications per channel every 24 hours. And so yesterday, I posted 2 videos later in the evening at like 9 and one at like 10:30. And then I did a video this afternoon, which means you likely got 3 notifications, like one at like 9, one at 10 or 11, and then one this afternoon, which means you might have gotten your 3 for my channel for the day, which means you didn't get this one for the live stream. So one of the reasons I usually try to limit to 3 postings a day, if I can, in a 24-hour period, is because any more than that, the video won't get a notification. And notifications are crucial because that's like your influx of viewers. Unless a video is like such a big topic that like it's going to get searched a lot by random people, a video can really stagnate if you don't get your notification views, especially a small to medium-ish channel like mine. A very big channel, maybe they get away with it, like Kyle Kalinske or something, right? That's something. Yeah, Dave Sirota's been really good too. Uber Comrade says, you hate liberals more than fascists. What the F is wrong with you, other than all your takes and opinions? I do not hate liberals more than fascists. That is not true. Although I do very much hate liberals. I do very much hate them. But I don't hate liberals more than fascists. Uber, I don't think you're being very much of a comrade, Mr. Uber. Just how you're acting tonight. John Bartlett says, who is worse, Trump or Mitch McConnell? Good question. That's a tough one. Man, I don't know. That's a good one, John Bartlett. That's a good one. Well, I think Trump is worse in how he expresses some of his viewpoints, but I think Mitch McConnell is more competent. I'm not defending Mitch, but Mitch McConnell is competent as a scumbag more than Trump. And so I think McConnell might be more dangerous than Donald Trump. But I don't know if he's worse or less worse either. I think he's more dangerous. That's why I really hope, and it's unlikely, but it's possible that he gets defeated in his Senate race, because the Democrats did win the governor's mansion in Kentucky in 2018, meaning there's at least, last year in the 2019 race, which means there is a chance for them to win another statewide race at the Senate. Although it's going to be harder. Because there are some people that vote Democrat statewide, but they're vote Republican nationally. Brandon C says she has to run in 2024 against Warren. That's Brianna Joy Gray. I have heard that. I don't know if she'll jump right to Senate, but that would be really cool. I just want her to really continue to expand on her own because she's fantastic. Brianna Lloyd is legendary. Never Trump feel da burned 1353. I don't know what that is. Craig, thanks for deleting those. Again, if you are, that name sounds like it would be friendly to the channel. Please don't spam if you are being friendly. Moderators don't remove comments that disagree with me. As you can see, Uber Comrade has posted 3 or 4 of those. But if you're using slurs or you're being rude to other viewers or you're making it hard for people to read the chat, I'm going to ask that people delete that. Warren was in the race to attack Bernie Sanders. Dan, I don't know. I can't guarantee. I'm not 100% sure she started in the race to attack Bernie, but by January, that's what it was. So, because there was a moment where Warren jumped in first, and then when Bernie had his heart attack, she was actually in second. And actually, if you guys remember, there was a few days in the summer, early fall, where Warren was first place by just a little bit. She actually was the first person to come close to Biden in any polling during this whole race. Not even Bernie came that close until he passed Biden, in January, February, right? So Warren, I think, did enter because she wanted to win. But at some point, she was like, I'm staying in to screw Bernie. That's my viewpoint. I've come around to that over the past couple months, especially. Brandon C says, can Cuomo run for a 4th term in New York? I'm not sure what New York's constitutional rules are. Here in Canada, at the federal and provincial, there's no term limits. You could be prime minister for 50 years consecutively. So we don't do the whole term limit thing here in Canada. And I'm generally against term limits because I feel they limit people's democracy. If Obama wanted to run again in 2008, he should have been allowed to. I'm a tool. You constantly get things wrong. Thank you. Uber Comrade. Disco, this is a totally tubular stream. Tim Kennelly says, boycott Amazon. Yes, boycott Amazon. They've been exploiting their workers both in the tech and warehouse sides. David Dole did a really good video on the Rational National yesterday or the day before, recently, last couple days. Go check David out if you haven't. David Dole, Doel. Go check him out. He basically did a video where one of the Amazon VPs quit and basically called the company chicken shit and said that they're not respecting their workers and they're not doing enough to protect them, and he wasn't going to be a part of it anymore. That he had a lot of admiration for the company and in a sense, but felt that it's lost its way. And it was a great statement from a multimillionaire CEO type, CFO type, that I don't normally give a lot of credence to, but he did a really good job there. Samantha says that she maybe Field the Burn was blocked accidentally. Usually it's a timeout. People can come back. If it happens accidentally, I apologize, guys. No one here means any ill will. Sometimes a finger slips, but you're welcome to be here. Joseph says, I think Warren is better than a lot of senators, but as a progressive, she's such a disappointment. I think that's fair. If you looked at the 100 senators that exist and you said, okay, who's better than Warren? And so you throw out all the Republicans, and that's 53 senators. And then you throw out most of the Democrats, most of them are awful. And so, what are you left with senators that are even comparable to Warren? Maybe, Ed Markey, Tammy Baldwin. Obviously, Bernie's better, obviously. But like, so is she like the fifth or sixth best senator? Maybe the third or fourth best senator? I'm not defending Warren, but I'm saying the bar is so microscopically nanometers, close to the ground that like even Warren can hop over that, right? And she's still one of the better senators, which is terrifying. In any just society, Warren would be like the center right of your Senate, not the third or fourth most progressive senator. One thing that I actually thought, Dan makes a point that Biden was dead and if the Obama machine didn't resurrect him. I think it's a little bit more complicated than that. I think what happened was that they were scrambling this whole time to find someone to replace, to not be Bernie. And at first it was Beto. Remember Beto? You remember Beto? And then it was Kamala. And then it was, Pete Buttigieg tried to get the bump. And then they thought maybe it would be Warren. They didn't want Warren as much as the other neoliberals, but it could be Warren. And then everyone tried to make Amy Klobuchar a thing for like 4 months, even though she never pulled higher than like 7. And like most of them had zero support among Hispanics or Black Americans or anybody that wasn't like white university people. And so they tried everybody and were ready to get rid of Biden. And then what happened is that, Klobuchar and Buttigieg did well in those first 2 states. They both had good Iowas and New Hampshires. But there was no hope for them after those states because Nevada was going to be very Hispanic, South Carolina, very African-American. Those groups did not like Buttigieg or Klobuchar. They liked Bernie and they liked Biden, right? So it came down to the fact that Biden was the only choice. And I think that the South Carolina thing really created the impetus. And Obama played a role, but I think like the media played a role, just the neoliberal desperation at stopping Bernie played a role. Like, that's what happened. I think that one of my Twitter friends told me like their theory, and I think this is interesting, is that one of the reasons Biden was thrown to the wayside wasn't just because he was performing really poorly, but because the party knew that Biden was going to get Me Too'd with Tara Reade or another woman, right? Like somebody who's not Tara Reade. And they didn't want him because of that. But when it came down to it, no other neoliberal could beat Bernie. In the one-on-one polling, none of them were close enough to Bernie. None of them were anywhere near Bernie's level of support with non-white voters. And so they were stuck with Biden and said, look, we'd prefer not to have a candidate with the Tara Reade story for the next 6 months, but anything is better than a guy that wants to give everybody health care. So they went with him. And I think it was honestly a move of desperation. And Argus says that if Biden is forced to withdraw, his delegates will be apportioned to those remaining on the ballot according to their relative holdings. That means that most of Biden's delegates will go to Bernie. That's true, but I wonder if he drops out at the convention, if they could time it a certain way that they could prevent Bernie. I wouldn't be surprised that they would try to find some kind of move. Tom S. says, good evening, Christo. Do you think, barring health-related disaster, there's even a remote chance of Joe Biden dropping out? I think there's the remotest of remote chances, as I said to John Barlich. I think it's possible, but unlikely. Typical Canadian. There's like timing issues here. If he picks a VP and then Biden was to so if Biden wins the election and then dies even before inauguration or right after, then his VP gets to be president. and that would be their term. It's their first full term. If Biden was to die more than 2 years into his term, then the VP would finish the term, but it wouldn't count as one of their 2 terms. So you can be president up to 10 years if you finish up the second half of another person's presidency. If he dies before the convention or has to drop out, as people noted, the delegates could be reapportioned, things like that. If it happens in between the convention and the election, then I think the party basically gets to decide. And I would think, my inkling would be that the VP would likely get thrown onto the into presidency, and somebody else would get picked to serve as the VP. Doug was demonetized 16 minutes into program. Yeah, I'm not sure why it happens sometimes. It could be the nature of what we're talking about. I'm not a big swearer. I tried not using the coronavirus word, but it is what it is. I mean, with live streams, a lot of the monetization comes from super chats and support in that way. But it's something that you notice happening. And I think they're being a little bit stricter on live streams because they have less live staff. So if there's anything that's edge case, they demonetize. Yeah, unions are not a scam, 100%. Unions are not perfect like any institution, but the vast majority of unions are fantastic. And even the ones that have problems are better than no union at all. Brandon C says, Samantha Sider says, the politicians are a death cult, while the vast majority of America isn't and is actually pretty left. That's pretty true, actually. They don't always vote that way, but I did see a poll, actually right here. MSNBC tweeted this out. Let me check this out. I want to pull this up. I know MSNBC isn't always the best source, but on some every once in a while they get it right. And they did a poll here, and they asked folks. Let me find this. Where is this? Just one sec, guys. Okay, here's what it said. This is from Monmouth University, which is a respected pollster. They asked people, and they said states will start lifting restrictions. Do you think? Let me close my right here. Actually, it says here, states will start lifting restrictions too quickly, not quickly enough, and 63% of Americans think that states are going to be moving too quickly. Only 30% say not quickly enough. Meaning that a strong 70% of Americans, which means it has to include a good chunk of Republican voters, people that support Donald Trump, believe that things are moving too fast. So the vast majority of people, a strong majority, aren't part of the death cult. Like the people you see protesting are a minority of a minority of a minority. It's a small minority of mostly far-right pro-Trump people. But the average Republican voter even doesn't, I don't think, wants to reopen yet. Miranda says that is there another service for sending super chats? I found out yesterday that YouTube takes 30%. YouTube does take a cut. There are other ways to support the channel. Not necessarily. There are some other programs for super chats. One thing you can do if you want to support the channel is to become a member of the channel here. You can do it on Patreon. Patreon does charge fees, but it's less than a super chat fee. You can also send me money via PayPal. I don't know if I have a PayPal link, but you could send me money via PayPal, and that will that has a far small. Again, it has a nominal fee, but it's actually quite small. And you can do that on a kind of one-time basis. And those are, like Super Chats, they are one-time funds. I believe there is a PayPal link in my description. So those are all ways you can support the channel. PayPal, Canadians can even do Interact e-transfers to my email and things like that. So there's lots of ways you can support the channel. But you don't have to do Super Chats if you don't feel like you want YouTube to take a portion of it. I totally get that. And with that in mind, Holly Edgecombe has just become a member of the channel. Holly, thank you so much. As you guys can see, people who are members of the channel get a little button next to their name, and that helps to mark them out to me. It makes it a little easier for them to stand out, and the button changes color as you've been a member longer. So some of the people who have yellow buttons have been members for, I believe, 2 months. and those people are very helpful in terms of helping the ongoing nature of the channel. It's very similar to Patreon, but it's baked into YouTube. Loot the Rich, Sarah says, your share of the American stimulus check. Loot the Rich, thank you so much. I very much appreciate it. And I totally get that a lot of people, even during the best of times, can't offer direct support. But honestly, the best way people can support the channel is that, when I put a video out, find some time during the day to watch it. Let it play, share it around to friends you might think like my stuff. That's how the channel grows, right? Left-wing content, the algorithm doesn't always like our content as much, so it really helps when we share it around. Lonnie says, thanks, Christo. Wish I had more to give. Everybody smash the like and help support this great channel. Lonnie, thank you so much. Look, again, people give what they can. I'm not like a certain Twitch streamer that's going to shame people. I'm not going to get into that, but just look it up. You'll see it. You'll see what it is. But, it's certainly something to consider. It is definitely very much appreciated when people support the channel. It helps it grow. It helps me sustain it. When I get support through things like Patreon, it means that when I make a video that's controversial, that might get demonetized, I know that it won't be totally without compensation. And members of the channel are very important with that. Also, we have here, John says, again, with another support, hey, I just saw your Twitter profile pic. You look like a 1970s drug dealer. Well, John, I gotta say, I don't know if you mean that as a compliment or as a detriment. I actually like that picture of me. I don't know if I do as much anymore, John. I'll take a look at it. I don't know if people have seen it, but go check out my Twitter picture. It's me dressed relatively nice. I was at a friend's wedding when my wife took that picture. And it's, I did not know it made me look like a drug dealer, though. I did not know that. Maria says, do you think Biden will choose Bernie for VP? I don't, Maria. I don't. For a few reasons. One, the whole point of Biden being president or being the nominee was to stop Bernie at all costs. And Biden being old like Bernie means that, and not being well, I think, means there's a good chance he wouldn't be able to finish out his term, which would make Bernie president, which the rich and wealthy and well-connected want to stop at all costs. Two, Biden has always said he wants somebody who he agrees with on the big issues, and Bernie and him have different values on, like, Medicare for all, Green New Deal, even like marijuana legalization, right? They're different guys. Another factor is also that Biden has promised to pick a woman. And I actually agree. I think that's a good promise. I do. I'm not identity politics over everything, but I do think identity matters. And I don't think it's unreasonable or wrong for Biden to say, I'm going to pick a woman. And so with that in mind, it can't be Bernie, right? So I think Biden, and this isn't my wish list, but I think Biden is considering, he says he has a list of like 12 people. But I think like the actual contenders are like Whitmer from Michigan, Amy Klobuchar. I actually think Klobuchar might be the favorite. Stacey Abrams, Kamala Harris, Elizabeth Warren. I actually don't think Warren is going to be picked, but I think she's definitely on the short or medium list. So Bernie's not going to be VP. He's not going to be. Koru became a member of the channel. Koru, again, thank you so much for your support. Ongoing and current. I really appreciate that. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Environmental Canadian says, did you get a chance to see Michael Moore's film? I did. And I've read some more about it. I mean, I think the critics make a lot of good points. I don't fully disagree with the assertion that an over-reliance on like green capitalism is distracting us from some of the core issues, which is that it's like capitalism is the flaw. Like you need to not only be green but also be anti-capitalist, and that you're not gonna Tesla your way out of global warming and the climate crisis. But a lot of the specific claims in the movie have been rightfully criticized by progressive left environmentalists, and the movie's nod to overpopulation theories, I think, is at the very, very least troubling. If not, it could dangerously slip into neo-colonialism and racist and eugenic arguments. So I think it's a misstep for Michael Moore. I don't think we should cancel Michael Moore, but I think it was a misstep for him to put his stamp on that project. Joseph says The Simpsons predicted a pandemic and killer bees. They always know. The Simpsons predicted everything. If you guys saw that old South Park episode, Simpsons did it. But there's also a subreddit on Reddit called R Simpsons Did It. And it's just people posting news stories about something that The Simpsons predicted. The Simpsons will have been running for 30 seasons and still more to come. So it's undeniable that they're going to make big hits. John Bartlett says, you hear about Elon Musk's tweet. John, what specific tweet? We talked a little bit about them last week on the stream. We talked about his Reopen America tweet and how I felt it was deeply inappropriate, how Elon Musk is very anti-worker. And I feel that a lot of people like him because he does kind of have this cool image, and it is cool to see him investing in green technology to some degree, but that he's actually very much like an Ayn Rand type libertarian in some ways. That's not at all very friendly to progressive causes. And he's actually a huge hypocrite because he made a big deal of smoking pot with Joe Rogan on his podcast. But then when workers at his Tesla plant tested positive for having marijuana in their system, they were fired for it. They just so happened to be people that may have been involved in union organizing. So he used marijuana as an excuse to union bust while he was publicly using marijuana with Joe Rogan on a live stream. It's totally inappropriate. And not to mention, he gave his son an absolutely ridiculous name. It's like XAE-E12. I don't even know what it is. It's awful. Awful stuff. And John again with the question said, the tweet that took $14 billion off his stock. I believe I know which one you're talking about. Yeah, Elon Musk tweeted something that I think he tweeted that Tesla was overvalued and that tanked the stock by $14 billion. I don't know if you can fully attribute it to that tweet, but I did see that. He was trolling, which means that he lost a lot of money there because he owns a large portion of Tesla, right? It's like with Jeff Bezos. Jeff Bezos is the richest man in the world most of the time. But if Amazon stock ever takes a big dip, he can fall to second because the vast majority of his wealth is linked in to the direct valuation of Amazon on the stock market. Because a good chunk of his wealth is the Amazon stock that he holds. Rowing Fish says, support Shahid Buttar, the primary challenger of Pelosi. Democratic, socialist, progressive activist, brilliant constitutional lawyer. Exactly. Rowing Fish, 100%. I've made a video a couple weeks ago about how Nancy Pelosi is lying, like bold-faced lying. Even a lie even for Pelosi when she says Republicans are trying to unseat her in November, but she's not running against a Republican. The way it works in California, just for everyone to be clear who doesn't know this, their primaries in March on Super Tuesday aren't all within parties, right? They aren't all within one party. Everyone gets to run, and you can run as many Democrats or Republicans or independents as you want. And then the final two, regardless of which parties they're in, the top two are on the ballot in November. So Pelosi finished first, Buttar finished second, meaning it's a Democrat versus a Democrat in November. It's impossible for Pelosi to lose to a Republican. And the district is a very pro-Democrat district, so it wouldn't happen anyway. And so you can, without risking electing a Republican, you can replace one of the worst Congress people. You can give her retirement so she can go eat ice cream and elect Shahid Buttar, an actual left-winger who will represent a progressive district. 100%. Maria says, do you think Biden will pick Nina Turner as his VP? Biden should pick Nina Turner, but he won't. He won't pick Nina Turner. It would be great if he did. That would be a great outreach to the left. If he picked Nina Turner, I think a lot of people would still not vote for him because they don't believe in him. But my goodness, would that be tempting to a lot of Bernie supporters to grit their teeth and vote for Biden. But I don't think so. Again, I think he's going to pick Harris or Abrams or Whitmer or Klobuchar or maybe Warren. I think that's who he's going to pick. John Barlett says, gave money to Buttar, good guy, I think. We need to get him in. Yeah, 100%. If you were a Bernie donor and you still, I know a lot of people don't have a lot of money right now because of the current crisis, obviously. But if you're a Bernie donor and you're like, well, where do I donate my political money right now? One thing to consider is donating them to close races where progressives are running. Like, so giving some money to Rashida Tlaib, who's running a primary challenge, is a good one. Giving some money to Shahid Buttar, who's running, is a good one. Like, giving money to down ballot progressives. One, it's like there's no point in giving Bernie money right now. He's not running anymore. But two, when you're talking about local races for Congress, every individual dollar has more weight. Because at the presidential level, campaigns are run on the billion-dollar scales. But, smaller congressional campaigns cost less. So say you give $50 to Bernie, it's going to be a lot more valuable to give $50 to Shahid Buttar in terms of helping him win. No. So Brianna's just going to say goodnight to everybody. She was like, I wanted to join, but it's been a really long day. So everyone say goodnight to Brianna, and we'll see her next week on the stream. Thanks, Bri. Good night. Chase says, great piece and Passage. For those who don't know what Passage is, I'm going to link you my piece. Passage is a Canadian online publication, very similar to Jacobin in some ways, I would say. It's only online, at least as of now, but it's a great source, and you guys should check it out. This is my article. I basically talk about how the left wing in Canada isn't getting enough credit for how we've responded to the COVID-19 crisis. So if you want to check that publication out, it's a good source to read about the Canada from a left-wing perspective for those who are maybe not, who want that news. And it's a news source. It's only been running for a couple months. Skip noting that Me Too Biden has really exposed the Me Too hypocrisy within the Democrats, 100%. But of course, the Republicans are Me Too hypocrites as well, because they've said nothing about Trump or Kavanaugh at all, and now they actually think they care about women. The only people that have been somewhat consistent have been those on the left, because we criticized Kavanaugh and Biden. Doug saying that Wendy's, the burger chain, is having meat supply issues. That's interesting. There might be ramping up the non-meat burgers because they just don't have enough supply. That's very interesting. I didn't know that, Doug. I'm going to look into that. I mean, from our perspective, at least here in Ontario, Canada, we haven't had any issues buying meat, either from the grocery store or ordering it from a butcher. We haven't noticed any meat supply issues, but that doesn't mean they're not coming. Big Dog 3004 says, here's a donation from a Trump supporter. Well, thank you so much, Big Dog, again. Most of my listeners are not Trump supporters. Most of them aren't. Most of my viewers. But I think some people come here because I do tend to be maybe more critical of Trump than I am of the Democrats. But I'm also, I think, pretty straight shooting when it comes to my criticism of the neoliberal corporate wing of the Democratic Party. And I think people like to see that. So thank you so much. I very much appreciate it. Craig says, what do you think the left should do to build institutional power while we're dealing with COVID-19? I think working on our digital communications is key. The United States, the left in the U.S. is better than that than we are in Canada. But you're starting to see Jagmeet, Nikki Ashton, Matthew Green, other NDP MPs doing the daily live stream thing. And I think we need to use the internet to have fun. We need politicians like AOC. When she first got elected, she was cooking on a live stream and talking politics. Even a few weeks ago, she did a thing where she was making margaritas and drinking margaritas, just chatting politics. And I think that, like, it would be great if you saw, like, Jugmeat, at home cooking dinner, talking politics. Matthew Green, doing the same thing. It would be kind of cool to see politicians, like, playing, like, Smash Brothers, just talking politics. I think that would be really cool. And I think that now's the perfect time to do that, because everyone is at home. And I think, like, we have to make politics fun in that way. John Bartlett says, hey, today is Nurses Day. My mom's a nurse working her behind off. John, your mom is a fantastic person. Nurses are underappreciated all the time. But right now, even though we're starting to recognize them more, I still don't think people realize what an underappreciated job nursing is, and how crucial they are to healthcare, and how, in many ways they're even more important than doctors or physicians or whatever, because they do such crucial work. They're underpaid compared to doctors, and I think nurses are some of the most essential workers our society has. And of course, not all nurses are women, of course, but nursing as a female typified position is undervalued, and I think that's a real shame. I don't want to do this thing where I fall too far behind, so I'm going to jump ahead a little bit because I want to be a part of the conversation. Yeah, so Aaron notes Matthew Green for Hamilton Centre NDP has been doing live streams every day. And I was on his live stream on Friday. I don't know if you guys saw. There was some technical issues. My internet was bad that day, but it was great to have him on the live stream. That was really great. Or to be on his live stream. Look for him to be on the channel sometime in the next week or two. I might have him on. He's really great. I think that he's going to be a star in the party for a long time. Doug said I watched AOC live stream right before this. Okay, that's great. I mean, it's great that there people are doing the live streams. Bernie did the live streams. I think, honestly, like, I'm not saying, like, live streams are going to be the silver bullet, but I think it's something that's, like, accessible, and we all need to, like, do it for the left. Like, the left needs to mobilize on the internet. Angus says Canada is a lot bigger than Canada is as large as the US, a bit bigger. It is bigger. It's the biggest country in the world except for Russia. And yes, way less people per square mile, square kilometer. Canada is one of the least dense countries in the world. One challenge with Canada is that most Canadians live within the border. So some of the land we have is you could certainly live on it, but there's not. It can often be in pretty harsh territory. Much of Canada's land is in the far north, where very, very few people live, because you can't really grow much up there, even during the summer. Maybe global warming will change that, but that's not necessarily the case. The soil still might not be good for growing. Yeah, but like the vast majority of Canadians live within 100 kilometers, which is basically 60 miles or so from the US border. So most Canadians live in a narrow strip along the border. A lot of people thinking nurses right now. That's great to see. Fantastic. Koru says Al Franken did a live stream a couple weeks ago. He drew a map of the states, did a pretty good job of it. That's actually probably pretty tricky. I mean, I think I would do a pretty good job of a map quiz of, like, states or Europe or something. Like, give me a map and, like, this is this country, what's its name? Or a blank, like a geographic map without borders. Can you click on this country? I think I do a pretty good job, but I don't think I could draw the states on a map very well. I think I would really struggle with that. Like, I think I could get California and Florida, obviously, and then sort of build from there. Like, I know Nevada kind of is like like it's got that slant where California is, if you know what I mean. And like Washington and Oregon sort of are like squares or rectangles on top of Florida. So I could do some of it, but I would really struggle. Comrade Internet here says back internet connection hiccuped. I wonder, people's internet must be tested more because a lot of people are doing work streams and more live streaming, more FaceTiming with family and friends and like, girlfriends, boyfriends, whatever. Like, the internet's got to be more taxed than normal. Ludocracy says Canada and America's border is legendary. It is a very interesting border. It's the longest border between two single countries in the world. The border is the longest peaceful border in the world of countries that have been essentially allies for a long time. In much of the border, there's basically no fence. Like in more populated areas, there is, right? In more populated areas, but there's large parts where the border's just like a space in a forest or in a mountain range or on a prairie. It's very interesting. And if you look, there's some great YouTube videos about how the border is weird because when they decided to make when Britain, because it was still Britain, Canada hadn't been formed as an independent country yet. But when the United Kingdom and the United States decided where to draw the western boundary, they used the Great Lakes, but they didn't necessarily know how it was going to play out. And they weren't accurate in measuring the longitude and latitude over the entire continent. They made mistakes. They did a good job, but they made mistakes. And so there's all these weird exceptions. Like a small part of Vancouver Island, the Point Roberts, I believe it's called, is actually part of the United States. But there's only like 1,200 people that live there. And so for them to get to the US, they have to go all the way around into Canada to go to Washington State. And then there are other exceptions like that as well. Vaudre says density probably helped with coronavirus. I mean, I think that was one advantage Canada might have had. Although we have some very big cities that form a massive part of our population. Like Toronto is a much bigger part of Canada than New York is of the US. Because Toronto's got 4 or 5 million people, but that's in a population of 35 million. So in the GTA, more than 1 in 10 Canadians lives in Toronto and the surrounding area. New York isn't that big. New York City isn't that big on its own. America would need a city of about 35, 40 million people to have the proportional weight of Toronto. So Canada does have low density, but where it's high, it's very high relative to the rest of the country. Eric says Charles Booker is our guy in the Kentucky Senate race. I don't know much about Charles, honestly. I don't know if he's like a moderate, maybe they feel like he's like the kind of guy you need to win in those states. I'm not often supportive of like the moderate Democrats, but like if you are going to run moderates, you should run them in red states, right? Like Nancy Pelosi should not be a congresswoman in liberal San Francisco. It's ridiculous. You should run left-wing candidates in your safest districts and run moderates in more swing districts. And so I don't know much about this Charles Booker guy, but he's got to be better than McConnell, right? He's got to be better than Mitch. Gene says, or Jean, I'm not sure which one, Gene. I used to be a history/geography teacher. You wouldn't believe how horrible American high school students' knowledge of identifying countries is. I think, that's one of the things about being like the world power. Like, even now with China rising, the US is still like the world power. And if you were like 20 years ago, it was undisputed because China was still developing, to become what it is. And so like, I think a lot of Americans really don't see beyond their borders all that much. And it's why when they say the NFL, you win the NFL, you're the world champions at the NFL. Well, the NFL, like only Canada and the United States really play like American-style football, and Canadian football is actually different, and there are no Canadian teams in the NFL. It's like you call the baseball the World Series, but there's only one team that's not in the United States, the Toronto Blue Jays. So there's I think American-centric, American-centric thinking is a major issue for that country, even more than other countries that are rich and powerful. Comrade Internet says annex Point Roberts. You would take it over. Maybe there's oil in Point Roberts or diamonds or something. Typical Canadian says, I always think the populations of Canada and California are comparable. That's probably pretty accurate. Let's double check here. Canada population right now is estimated to be about 37.6 million. California is 39.51 million. So California actually has more people than Canada, and they have since about for most of the last generation or two. And they've always sort of been close. Canada's starting to catch up to California a little bit, but we are the same size. Canada's biggest province, for comparison, is Ontario, which is about 14.5 million, 14.6. Put it another way, California's got about 40 million in a country of over 300, whereas Ontario's at 15 in a country of less than 40. So Ontario and our big cities are such a big part of Canada in a way the biggest U.S. cities aren't, because you guys have more big states, more big cities. It's not just New York, Chicago, L.A. You also have Dallas, Houston, Boston, Miami, Seattle. I could go on to Philadelphia, Washington, D.C., all of these, Pittsburgh, think of all the big cities you guys have. We only have Toronto is so much bigger than all our other cities. It's like 4 times bigger, 3 times bigger than Montreal as our second city. MSNBC viewers are Fox News or the Democratic Party. Car wash freak. Yeah, I think that's somewhat fair. MSNBC has some more decent viewer. I think Chris Hayes from time to time does a good job. I think that sometimes, like with Fox News, they can accidentally do good journalism. But yeah, I would think that's somewhat fair. I think that the MSNBC is definitely, it represents the corporate wing of the Democratic Party. It doesn't actually represent what Democratic voters want. Democratic voters want Medicare for all, a Green New Deal. They want Bernie Sanders policies, even if they didn't vote for him. But the Democratic establishment is the MSNBC is like a mouthpiece for that, at least for the most part. Toronto is freaking huge. No matter says takes 2 hours to drive through it at 3 a.m. with no traffic. Toronto's not a massive city compared to New York or Chicago or LA. Toronto is, I believe, comparable to Chicago. If I look this up. Toronto vs. Chicago. Okay, so Chicago's got... Okay, so now that's... Wait, let me see. Okay, Toronto population. So Toronto population is about... Now, this is the definition of Toronto versus the Greater Toronto Area. The Greater Toronto Area is about 6 million. But that includes a big space. And it's not... Whereas Chicago population, if you include the Chicago just Chicago City, it's 2.7. So I'm guessing Toronto and Chicago proper are similar. They're similar sizes. John says, who is the best live action Spider-Man? Honestly, I like the newest movies. I really do. I like the Marvel Cinematic Universe Spider-Mans. I like the way he was integrated into the Avengers and into the mainline movies. His relationship with Tony Stark and Iron Man. And also, I like the standalone. I haven't seen the second one yet, but I really liked the first like modern Spider-Man movie. It was really fun. But still, like, it was a good movie. All In with Chris Hayes is about the only MSNBC I watch. Lonnie, that's a good one. And I mean, we talked about it on the channel. He did a good job suggesting that people shouldn't just defend Joe Biden because he's on the blue team when it comes to Tara Reade. And that the whole point of Me Too is to, like, put aside the tribalism when it comes to women. When they talk about our guy, we shouldn't just call her a liar. And when they talk about our opponent, it's like we should listen to the actual people. And they tried to, the Biden people tried to get him fired. They tried to get Chris Hayes fired. So I'm not saying he's perfect, but I felt that, like, when Bernie went on his show, I felt he got more of a fair shake than he did with most other journalists, on MSNBC and even on a lot of other networks. Vaudra is saying, I think you're saying here, Sean, Peter MacKay versus Aaron O'Toole. I think what you're saying, the conservative race, what it's going to come down to. I think you're right, Vaudre. I think if you asked me a few months ago, I would have thought Peter MacKay was a lock to win. And I think I was right. But the COVID crisis has changed things. It's allowed the race to be longer, which has given Aaron O'Toole more time to build his name. Peter MacKay looked like a monster when he was saying, like, we need to, during the COVID crisis, he's like, we need to get this done now. Like, he was trying to rush it so he could win. And it made him look really awful. I still think McKay's going to win. But if you go by fundraising, Aaron O'Toole is very competitive. I think he's got a shot. I think he does. And Aaron O'Toole, it should be remembered, finished third in the last conservative leadership race. Andrew Scheer won, Maxime Bernier finished second, and Aaron O'Toole was third. And it did okay. So it's not like he has no support. Like, it's not like he has no base. Maria says, what do you think of the anti-Trump ad Kellyanne Conway's husband just came out with regarding the pandemic? Was it the Morning in America one by, like, the anti-Trump Republicans? I mean, I thought it was pretty effective as a production, if we're talking about the same one. I thought it came off pretty well. I don't know if it's going to flip any Republicans. We have to remember that, like, Trump has, like, a 94% approval rating among Republicans. So there's not a whole lot of, like, meat on that bone. I'm not saying don't try to win Republicans, but I'm saying the Democrats' focus should overwhelmingly be on energizing young, racialized, poor voters to get them to vote, because that's how Obama won. The difference between Clinton and Obama, 2012 to 2016, was the lower turnout. If the same amount of people voted in 2016 as voted in 2012, Hillary would be president right now. Guaranteed. It was a very close election. And if the people that stay home are more likely to be young and they're more likely to be racialized, and those people are more likely to vote Democrat, then and Hillary would have won that election, guaranteed. If a few more million people just voted. So Hillary made the mistake of trying to get Republicans to vote for her, when the goal all along should have been to try to get people who voted for Obama to vote for her as well. Samantha says, everywhere but New York, the infection rate is rising, yet states are reopening, even though no state has passed the CDC's guidelines. We're seeing that a little bit in Canada, Samantha. In some parts of Quebec, the COVID crisis is clearly not over yet, but they're already planning some reopenings. In Saskatchewan, which hasn't been hit very hard, they actually had, like, their second worst day ever yesterday, and yet people are starting to plan reopenings. Actually, what I did when people who saw me on social media, I did, 14 CBC interviews today, and it was on how a lot of workers are going to be forced to go back to work, because if their workplaces reopen and they're deemed safe, they won't be able to stay on the CERB. Provinces might deem them as job quitters and not laid off people, and they won't be eligible anymore. And I think that that's going to be a major issue going forward. It's going to be a major issue. I think we're being a little, the United States especially, but even some parts of Canada are being a little too rash with their openings. Ontario's doing okay. BC's been doing the best by far, I think. Some provinces in the Maritimes, like New Brunswick, is basically, they have no more COVID cases. So they're doing some limited reopenings. But like Quebec's moving too fast, I think. They're moving too fast. And basically what's going to happen is like working class people are going to go out and work and they're going to get sick and they're going to die. Or their family, like if they have an elderly parent that lives with them, they're going to die. Like that's what's going to happen. And we might see everyone have to go back into isolation because the second wave could be really bad. And it's like, what was the point of opening? So I think it's far too rash to open now. Dan said, did Peter MacKay run in the last Conservative leadership race? No, he didn't, Dan. He didn't. He was an absent. A lot of people thought he might have. But what happened actually is that Peter MacKay was a longtime Conservative cabinet minister. And after 2015, a lot of Conservative big names sort of went away for a little bit. They either just retired or they took a break. Because most of the time, prime ministers that win one election get at least one more. It's like most US presidents get both terms. Like, most of the time you get to be president for 8 years, not just 4. So a lot of people a lot of big names didn't run for the leadership in 2017 for the Conservatives because a lot of people assumed Justin Trudeau was unbeatable. Because he was, and until the SNC-Lavalin scandal happened, he was polling in majority territory for most of the 4 years between 2015 and 2019. But the Conservatives ended up winning the popular vote, and I wonder if they would have had somebody more moderate, or at least who appeared more moderate than, say, Andrew Scheer, somebody like Peter MacKay, that the Conservatives wouldn't have been able to win a minority government in this election. It really makes you think if some of the bigger names ran. But a lot of them, I think, were sitting out assuming that, okay, Trudeau won in 2015. The next guy, whoever he is going to lose to Trudeau in 2019 and lose big. And then we're going to turf his ass. And then it's going to be my turn. And I'll come back in 2019. And I will have been gone for long enough that people will see me as new and fresh again, even though I'm a career politician. Sort of like what Jean Chrétien did. Jean Chrétien was a cabinet minister under Pierre Trudeau, ran for leader of the Liberals in the 1980s. He actually ran, but lost the leadership to John Turner, then went away from politics, and then came back and then replaced Brian Mulroney when Brian Mulroney was very unpopular and became the next prime minister. We're carrying signs now saying I'm having to reset my bell to all again. They're doing this to all my progressive channels, even with the extra reminder. Thanks for that. One thing, guys, a couple things. If you're new to the stream, click the like button. Apparently it matters. Click that like button. It might show the stream to more folks. Also, if you're a subscriber to the channel, I'm guessing most people here are, consider clicking the little bell next to the subscriber button. That bell means you'll get a notification when I post videos, and it helps because people who watch videos early, the first few minutes that a video is running, often help determine the success of that video. So it's helpful for the channel and for that particular video. So if you haven't clicked the little bell, consider doing that. It's very helpful for us in that way. So consider doing that. Sean asking if there's any chance for a left-right alliance to push for more worker support protection to say that the Liberals are lacking. I mean, I don't think so in Canada. If you look at the Conservatives, they're pushing against even the Liberals' bad CERB. I mean, I don't see in Canada like the potential, like we don't have a like they have in some parts of Europe, like a true like nationalist right, where they actually care about you if you're the right skin color and religion and ethnicity. And so they'll implement maternity leave benefits for women of the race. And this bleeds into fascism. So I don't actually want to make a lot of alliances with these people necessarily. But what I'm saying is, like, we don't have that. Our right-wingers, even Trump, is like, in most ways, he's a neoliberal. Like Trump, if everyone who calls Trump like a right-wing nationalist, they're not wrong. But if Trump was truly a far-right nationalist, he would be creating maternity leave and finding a way to aim it at white women. He would be creating free university for like Americans and trying to aim that at white children. He would be trying to do these things if he was a true far-right nationalist. Like, he would consider some of these things. But Trump, at the end of the day, is a standard neoliberal. He doesn't... free trade deals, screwing workers, cutting taxes for corporations, hanging out with the globalists, even though he criticizes them. And I think, like, there's no alliance in North America of, like, there's no pro-worker conservatives. It's not a thing. It's all disingenuous. There's no pro-worker liberals either. The democratic socialists are the only pro-workers. Like, not even in New Zealand even. Like, Jacinda Ardern was able to get support from nationalists there because she would crack down on foreign ownership of properties. But that type of nationalism does not exist in Canada. The PPC is hyper-capitalist in a globalist sense, and so is the Conservative Party. They just don't exist. Not federally, at least. Lonnie says, I lost my brother to the COVID-19, but everyone else is fine. Thanks. Lonnie, my deepest condolences. And if anybody else has had to suffer with COVID or had a relative, again, my deepest condolences. I'm so sorry. I've been fortunate enough. My wife and I have both been able to self-isolate. My son isn't going. Obviously, the daycares are closed pretty much everywhere in Canada. So he's been at home the whole time. My parents passed away years ago from an unrelated thing, but my wife's parents have also been safe. They're both a little bit older, in their late 60s, early 70s. But they're fine. So we've been very fortunate, but, I wish everyone the best. John says, what do you think about Alex Jones wanting to eat the butt? John, I don't know what to think about Alex Jones. On the one hand, the man is clearly unstable. But on the other hand, like, I don't know if you guys remember this, but a couple years ago, there was a thing where he did I think he was doing like a custody fight with his wife or ex-wife or baby mama or whatever. And I think like his mental health came up. And the show he did was referenced. Like, InfoWars was referenced on, like, regarding that, right? And then I think he had to argue, or his lawyers did, or whatever, had to argue that he's acting. And so I can't tell when Alex Jones is being legitimately crazy or when he's putting on a show for his far-right audience so they can give him money and so he can hawk his like fake supplements and all of that, right? I honestly don't know. I don't know what to think. Biden's approval rating not so good. Yeah, if you guys saw that video after this stream, check out my video where I note that Biden is at least according to one poll, not all polls show this, is 10 points more unpopular than Donald Trump. Donald Trump is minus 12, but Biden minus 22. And only a third of people like Biden, or 30-some%, 35, 36. Biden's in real trouble, guys, if that's the case. He's deeply unpopular. Aaron Clemens says the Dems don't want to win. I think they do want to win, but they don't want to win if it means selling out their interests. So they obviously want to win. Like, they want to win, if only out of vanity. Like, the rich treat politics like a polo game, like a game of golf. You want to win. But you'd rather lose than Bernie win. And I do believe that's the case. For maybe not for average Democrats, but for the Democratic Party establishment. I do believe they would rather lose than win with Bernie. I do believe that. But of course they would rather win. They just don't see any way to win with, to pick somebody that wasn't Biden unless it was Bernie. And so they got stuck with Biden. And now they're probably worried that if Biden quits, they could hypothetically find another neoliberal to get Biden, but it would be a travesty because Bernie was clearly the second choice of the party, including a lot of Biden voters that also really liked Bernie. And it would look really bad for them to throw the nomination to Cuomo, who got precisely 0 votes in the Democratic primary. So they're stuck, I think. Albert says, I believe that the Dems and Republicans are now fighting on the same voters. I mean, they have very different voting bases in some ways, but I think the Democrats are trying the strategy of fighting for a certain segment of Republicans, specifically educated white women that have often been swing voters. That's who they've often aimed for, and they think that if they can get those women to stop voting Republican in suburban areas and vote for the Democrats, that's where they can win. Those women do not like Donald Trump, for good reason, from my opinion. And those women voted for Trump in 2016, but voted Democrat a lot in 2018 in the midterms. And their hope is these women will come and vote for Joe Biden. But I think that's a really big risk, and I don't know if those voters are loyal. I think the better strategy is to fight for turnout. Maybe I'm wrong, but I think it's getting black people, getting working class people, getting Hispanic people, getting students, getting, and if you're going to get Republicans, go to get the former Obama voters. They are going to be the ones that win you Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, are the working class Rust Belt voters. They need to be won back if you want to win the election. Did Mike Tyson say he wanted to eat his competitors' children? He did say something along those lines. He did. Did you guys see the video of Mike Tyson training? He's in his early 50s. I'm just going to grab some water in a second. But he's in his early 50s, and he still moves like he looks like he hasn't lost a beat. He's still quick. So you always wonder if Mike Tyson would have had more stability in his own life, how great of an athlete he would have been, because he was already a great athlete. I'll be right back. What to do? Ansel Rick says, when Trump wins in November, it will be because of whining, crybaby Bernie Sanders supporters stayed home. I don't know if that's the case, Ansel. If we go back to 2016, that same argument was made, but it should be remembered that Bernie personally did more events for Hillary than she ever did for Barack, and more Bernie voters voted for Hillary Clinton in 2016 than Hillary voters voted for Obama in 2008. It was also the case that Hillary made a bunch of errors that have nothing to do with Bernie, which was that she didn't campaign at all in some swing states and insufficiently in others. She didn't spend nearly enough time in Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and because of that, she lost some potentially winnable elections. And it could have mattered in winning the whole shebang. or at least ensuring more Democratic senators and congresspeople, which, could have, helped in the medium term. In essence, Hillary was the reason the Democrats lost. She did not have any enthusiasm. And it's ultimately on the candidate to sell people on voting for them. Bernie Sanders was wrong when he called people irresponsible if they're not ready to back Biden. 2016, Bernie was right. That Bernie made a deal. He made a promise. Bernie's a man of his word, like him or hate him. He said, I will back the nominee. He did it in 2016, and he's doing it in 2020. Right? But what Bernie said in 2016 was, ultimately, I can tell my supporters that Hillary's okay. I can suggest that they vote for Hillary Clinton. I can do my best to bring my people over, and I will. And he did. Bernie kept his word. But Hillary has the ultimate responsibility, and I believe Biden does now, to go to those people and convert them. And look, with Tara Reade, a lot of people might not vote for Biden no matter what he proposes. But I fundamentally believe that if Biden proposed Medicare for all, he would win over a lot of Bernie people that aren't with him. And I know, my viewership just doesn't believe Biden, and I don't really believe him either. But we have to remember that the vast majority of people, including Bernie supporters, aren't as cynical as we are. And if Biden says, I'm doing Medicare for all because Bernie talked me into doing it, a lot of people will believe him. And so I really do think that, it's up to Biden to win Bernie people over. It's up to Biden. He has the choice to do it. There's a poll, 88% of Democrats. There was another poll, David Dole talked about it. 69% of Americans support Medicare for all. It is not unreasonable for Bernie supporters to say, Biden, we would like you to adopt the policy that was our signature policy and is supported by nearly 90% of the party, and every state in exit polling backed in the primaries, even the ones that voted heavily for you, even the ones that are red states come November. That's on Biden if he can't make that concession to the left. That's on him. Biden, at least for now, is the candidate. Right? He's the presumptive nominee. Who knows what will happen? Anything can happen. But he's barring any kind of crazy thing, he's going to be the nominee. And ultimately, Biden has the decision to make about what he thinks will be a good platform. Now, no political platform can appeal to everyone. And it's perfectly legitimate for, yes, John Barlow at 69%. Nice. Thanks for the support again, John. Very much appreciate it. No platform can appeal to everyone. And so if Joe Biden wants to design a platform that excludes the left, that's fine. But there are consequences to any platform you design. There are consequences. And Joe Biden is the one that bears those consequences, not Bernie Sanders voters. If he wants to design a platform that excludes some Bernie voters, Joe Biden and maybe includes some potential Republican voters, whether we think that's going to work or not, that's not our call. Biden's the nominee. It's his bed. He can make it. And he can mess it up or he can win or whatever. It's on him. But if he excludes the left, that's his choice, not the left's choice. Cora was saying that Bernie did more events than Hillary. I don't think overall, of course, but there were some moments where Bernie was very active. And it seemed like he was more vigorous than Hillary was for her own campaign. Absolutely everyone hated Hillary. Not absolutely everyone, but she was strongly, strongly disliked. And Biden is similar in that way. 28% of Hillary backers voted for McCain over Obama. That's very true. Bernie numbers nowhere near as high voting for Trump. Bernie should not have made that promise. He did not have to say anything. Koru, there's some debates there. Bernie making that promise might have been the effort to assure people that he was going to be a team player. There's actually a debate And actually, I think they're both right and they're both wrong. There's the debate that Bernie Sanders should have been more aggressive in attacking Biden. And I agree. He should have continued to hammer Biden on Social Security, especially. It was working, and then he stopped, and then Biden came back. But there's the other argument that what Bernie should have done when he became the front runner is positioned himself as a unifier more. Maybe not even being genuine about it. Basically saying that, like, once you become the front runner, you stop the anti-establishment language about the Democratic Party. And so some people felt Bernie should have said at some point, I'm going to be the unifier of this party, and stopped saying I'm going to attack the Democratic Party elite. It doesn't mean Bernie has to actually stop. He just has to pretend like he's going to stop. You know what I mean? Like play the game. And what Bernie did in saying that, I'm going to back the nominee no matter what, was something like that. That if Bernie said from the beginning, if he said out loud, hey, no matter what, I'm running third party. I don't give a rat's ass. Screw you all. If I don't win, I'm taking my ball home. If he said that, he wouldn't have gotten the support he initially got in 2016 or he got in 2020. So I think that, there's points to be made on multiple sides there. Dan, you're 100% right. Biden's never going to back universal health care. He's not. But my point is that because he's not, don't blame people who aren't willing to vote for his platform. Any platform designed will include certain voters and exclude certain voters. Right? That's my point. Well, there are arguments, typical Canadian, that Biden will make climate change worse as well with fracking. This is kind of the argument, like the liberals and conservatives both make it worse. The conservatives might make it worse-er. I don't necessarily disagree that Trump would make it worse-er than Biden. But there's no indication that Biden will necessarily make climate change better, though. 51% Bernie supporters likely to vote third party. I've seen some of those numbers. Most of the data we've seen in this election has been over 3/4 Bernie supporters in most polling will vote for the Democrat. And I assume that number will be accurate and probably even higher as we get closer to the election. But there's no denying that Bernie supporters are not happy right now. Yeah, I mean, Maid of the Mist makes a good point, too, that, Bernie pulled the vote for Hillary, did 41 events for Hillary, helped Hillary a lot, and then Hillary crapped on Bernie for the next 4 years after. So, I mean, I don't think that's a good example. I mean, that might turn some Bernie Sanders supporters off. I mean, if Hillary was gracious about Bernie's support and, for the next 4 years said, I disagree with Bernie on a lot of issues, but I trust that man when he says that he's loyal because he was loyal to me. And Hillary, that would have given people more credence that Bernie's support would be respected. Milos Junic says Biden has zero platform at this point. It's not quite that simple. Most Biden supporters can't name Biden platform, but Biden does have some platform pieces. Biden supports, for instance, a $15 minimum wage. You can say if he actually does or not, but he's part of his platform. If you go to Biden's website, he has platform pieces. He does. The problem is Biden is running in a campaign sense. He's thematically running without policy. And if you look at his voters, a real test is go to a Biden voter and say to them, without saying the words Trump and or Obama, tell me why I should vote for Joe Biden. And most of them, not all of them, but most of them will not be able to do it. return to normalcy is the only Biden campaign platform. I mean, at least in terms of communication. No, Diane, you're right that Bernie talked about uniting. But for instance, there were things Bernie could have done differently. Bernie brought out that ad where Obama said nice things about Bernie Sanders, but he didn't do it until after South Carolina. Bernie should have done that earlier. There are things Bernie could have done to nod to the party establishment, right? Bernie did some of that, where Bernie said, he talked a lot about his love of FDR and how Bernie was actually more loyal to progressive Democratic history than any of the other Democratic senators were, because they're all neoliberals, but Bernie's the one that supports the progressive history of the party. I think some of those were good moves. I just wonder if it was enough, or if Bernie on the other end should have just gone the other way and been even more aggressive and never stopped attacking. Joseph Mangano says, I will never watch Hillary's Hulu documentary, at least unless I want to voluntarily vomit. I think in Canada, it's on Netflix, I believe. And the opening clip is that time where she's like, I can't stand Bernie. He's done nothing. She basically calls him a loser and nobody likes him, right? We all saw the quote a couple months ago when it came out. But when I saw that, I got so angry. I'm not even watching it, but it auto-played the first 30 seconds or whatever, that little teaser, and I was like, I can never watch this. I'm not even one of these people that doesn't want to watch things I disagree with, but it's I can never watch this. I can't. I cannot watch the Hillary Clinton documentary. Cannot do it. Can't. I don't know if I can do it. Lonnie says he doesn't think the polls are honest, maybe not the elections either. I mean, I'm not sure about elections. You have to make real claims. I know in Canada, people have a lot of faith in the actual elections. Polling can be wrong. Polling can be biased in some cases. Polling can also have pitfalls, right? The polling in 2016 was not great, but it was not totally off base either. What the educated pollsters were saying was that most likely Hillary is going to win. But because of the electoral college, she might not. And they were right. Hillary Clinton won by millions and millions of votes. But her votes were spread poorly. And Trump's votes were spread very, very efficiently. And so when they projected a vote total and when they projected how likely that would make you president, it was actually very reasonable for people to say, Hillary's got a 60, 70, 80% chance of winning. Because if you run that election in a simulator 100, 1,000, 100,000 times with all the slight variation differences, Hillary likely does win that election 60, 70, 80% of the time. I don't think that's an unreasonable claim. Corus, you're not the only one that can't watch that, Christo. Grant says he wants my questions on Green Party candidates Ventura in the U.S., Lascaris versus Murner, and maybe Murray in Canada. In terms of Ventura, I mean, it's my knowledge, Grant. Maybe you can correct me if you know green politics better. That the primary's already going, and Howie Hawkins is already racking up Green Party delegates. How feasible is it for Ventura to jump in now and actually win? Right? Because Howie's running, like if I look this up, like 2020 Green Party primary, the 2020 Green Party presidential primaries, there's already been 16, 17, 18 contests. And Minnesota, which is Ventura's home state, has already voted. And Howie Hawkins has 106.5 delegates out of the total 402 delegates. I don't know if that's what are available. So he's a quarter of the way, maybe more, to winning. So, like, if Jesse Ventura wants to run, he has to jump in now and probably win huge margins over Howie. I don't know if that's going to happen. Like, you know, I don't think Ventura is going to do it. I don't think so. I think it's too late for him to jump in. In terms of the Greens, I mean, obviously, Lascaris is the person I would most identify with. I wonder if the party is going to get behind him, though. I wonder, like, how big is the left base for the Green Party? Most leftists in Canada are either members of the NDP or they're members of no political party. Like, they just don't believe that any of the parties, Green or NDP or anybody else, is good enough. And so I wonder if he'll be able to successfully get leftists to give money to him. I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to cancel my NDP membership to vote for Lascaris, and most NDP loyalists won't either. So he's going to have a real tricky time, and I think it's pretty clear that Elizabeth May is not going to want a Lascaris-type person to be her successor. So I wish him well, but I think he's going to really struggle. Like, I think Ventura's, like, so people aren't even sure if he's actually going to run. It's like, the problem is he'd be really behind the 8 ball, because in terms of winning delegates, again, 402, or I think there's 402 delegates. If that's the case, then Howie Hawkins is at 106.5. The total amount of delegates handed out now is like, we're looking at 106, 35 and a half, so 136, 141, 142, 152, 160, 165. 165 delegates have already been handed out. And so for Ventura to get a majority, he would have to get like 201 delegates out of 300. It's going to be very difficult for him to win. Very difficult. Yeah, Brandon C, though, yeah, you're right. But, I mean, the PragerU stuff is like, I don't know. The PragerU stuff is awful, but I feel like there's something just so much more gut-wrenchingly awful about the Hillary documentary in terms of how she lies about Bernie and stuff. I mean, the PragerU stuff is bad, but, like, you sort of, like, I don't know, it's like typical right-wing bad. The Green Party in Canada, at least unless Lascaris leads it, is much more eco-capitalist. It's more of a centrist party, whereas the Greens in the U.S., at least on a lot of issues, are more left-leaning, right? That's like a difference. But the Greens in Canada are still a young party. Like, they've only existed since, like, the 1990s, and they've only really been relevant politically for, like, 10 years. Before that, they didn't win any seats. They were super small and insignificant, if I'm being honest. And in fact, until this election, they didn't have more than one seat in Parliament, right? They won a by-election to have 2 briefly, but really, this was the first election federally that they've won more than one seat in one election. So the Green Party is still young enough and small enough that it could be, like, remolded, maybe. But there's also no, like, what's the class structure of the Green Party in Canada? Like, other parties have class structures. The NDP has, like, certain blue-collar trade unionists, young people, upper middle income public sector workers, highly educated, like lefty professor types, like internet people like me, liberal, like conservatives have like rural folks and like evangelical Christians. Liberal Party has like the kind of professional class, certain types of small business people, most like French Canadians outside of Quebec especially. Many immigrant populations are more likely to be liberal. So what's the Green Party's base in Canada? What's their ideological function and formation? And is that something that even hypothetically could be reoriented to a green working class politics? Like the NDP even is like not a definitive true without a doubt working class party. It's not. There, like there's the party has a working class element, but the party, like a lot of the people that are involved in the party are like educated middle and upper middle class people, right? Like that's the reality. People like myself, right? But I don't know. Like, what's the Green Party's base? The U.S. Green Party, I mean, both the parties are really small. Do they even have a base? Or is it just a bunch of random people that support those parties? No Context PragerU is a good follow on Twitter. Joseph, I've never heard of them. I'll definitely check them out. Also, for people who don't watch him, Sean, I think his channel is just named Sean. It's a really good channel that's broken down a lot of the PragerU videos. It might be a lot of stuff that you as a leftist might know, but if you have somebody who's like a good faith, like, what's wrong with these PragerU videos? They seem okay to me, then send them Sean, because he does really exhaustive breakdowns of right-wing ideology and how it's wrong and how it's misleading and how they play with statistics and things like that to lie. See, that's interesting. Kate saying the Green Party in Nanaimo, Ladysmith is all old people, college students, and more professional. See, that's interesting. It's like a mixture of maybe senior citizens concerned with the environment, young students that are environmentally conscious, and certain elements of like the hoity-toity class. I could see that working, but can it work beyond BC? Maybe like it worked in Fredericton, but that was a split vote. If the Liberals or Conservatives did a little bit better nationally, the Fredericton Green seat would have gone to either a Liberal or a Conservative. So that one's going to be tough to hold. So beyond Vancouver Island, because the NDP has multiple coalitions that are different in different places. In certain parts of the country, they're more traditional blue collar. In other parts, they're more yuppie downtowners. Like, they have different coalitions. Like, can the Greens build that? I don't know. And like, I mean, Get It Right makes a point here where they say that if you vote for Biden, you're just telling the Democrats that they can screw you over. I've like, on this channel, again, I've made this argument that, like, my goal isn't to, like, exclude people. There's going to be some people that are going to vote Democrat for harm reduction, and then there's people that are like, fuck it, I'm never voting Biden, ever. No matter what, you can shame me all you want. And both of those sides are welcome on this channel. I do think it's a reasonable argument to make, though, that, and Lawrence O'Donnell, who's a MSNBC host, there's this old clip of him from the 2000s, maybe from like the mid 2000s, I'm not sure, but it's like 15 years ago at least. And he's like, I never have to listen to the left because the left has nowhere to go in a general election. They're going to vote for whoever Democrat we put up, and I don't have to listen to them. Now, I don't think it's quite that simple, because Bernie Sanders has, even just by existing, has forced even Joe Biden to adopt a $15 minimum wage and some other basic policies. Now, Biden might be lying, but like, there are some things that Democrats have to at least pretend to support now. So you can change things through more than just voting. You can shape public discourse for the better. For instance, people kept on voting for the Democrats who also opposed gay marriage, right? People kept on voting for Obama and Clinton and Biden, and they all opposed gay marriage. And so under a pure theory that voting for the Democrats never gets you anywhere, there would have never been progress on gay marriage. And yet there was. Right? I know it was driven through the courts, but Barack Obama eventually, in his second run, endorsed gay marriage. Why was that? The left didn't go and vote for the Green Party. They didn't do that. What happened is that pressure from grassroots movements, from gay rights movements, made the issue unignorable, and they had to at least pretend to care. And so it's a mixture. I do think fundamentally, if you vote for the party, you limit your ability to keep them in check. But it's not always the only way at 100% of the time to change things. You could do so outside of narrow electoralism. The reason the $15 minimum wage is a main issue now is not only because of Bernie, but because individual working people on the municipal level all across the country made it an issue. It's not because they voted Green and the Democrats adopted it. It's because working class people forced it. Leafy's like, I can't even watch PragerU ads. All my lettuce says you said the F word. Look, I swear every now and then. It's just not very often. Jesse Ventura said something like, voting for the less of two evils is only endorsing evil. Look, I can see that as a perfectly legitimate argument. I can. I can see that. 100%. Yeah, Environmental Canadian, I think, says that Biden might just be a one-term president. You would never admit it, because that really hurts you. But I wouldn't be surprised if, hypothetically, Biden's able to actually win. And then he says something along the lines of, I've had a good 4 years, but I feel the country would be best served by my VP, and I'm endorsing my vice president to be the next president of the United States. Now, there might still be a primary. I mean, there could be a primary to challenge an incumbent, but it almost never happens. But I assume that if Biden runs and wins, and then say Kamala Harris is his VP, that he could step aside in 4 years and have her run in his stead. I could see that. I could see that. Not that I want that necessarily, but I could see that. Samantha Scyther says, at Christo Aivalis, you should have a subscriber goal that you will read Dave Rubin's new book or eat from a food bucket live on air. Samantha, I mean, maybe I'll think about like a new subscriber goal, maybe like 30,000, because I'm getting close to 25. I don't know if you guys see, but I'm getting pretty close. The sub growth has been a little bit slower since Bernie's dropped out. People I think people are a little bit demoralized now. But we're getting close to 25,000 right now on the channel. So once we hit 25, maybe I'll set a new goal. Yeah, Elizabeth May did a lot of lying and misrepresenting about the NDP. Yeah, I would agree. Yeah, I mean, Grant, I think you're right that Lascaris would really shake up the Greens and show that they're committed to an eco-socialist vision. And I think for those who do want a Green NDP merger, like the way it's going to happen is if somebody like Lascaris becomes leader. And I know he's not necessarily a fan of the NDP, but I do think that him being leader would be more likely to encourage cooperation than, say, Elizabeth May. John Bartlett says, do you have any upcoming videos? Well, I always have upcoming videos, John. Thanks for asking. I mean, I put up a video, at least one video, almost every day, often 2 or maybe even 3 videos. I almost always put up 3 before, but it's harder now with my son home from daycare. You know, I don't have as many hours in the day to do it, because Brianna has to work she still works full time, although from home. So I have to try to fit in my videos at night, or when he's napping, or when she's on a break. So I mean, I don't know. I mean, I'll probably going to continue to be following polling between Biden and Trump. I'm going to certainly be looking into, opening the economy and what that's going to be like. What else am I looking at? Probably looking a bit at the, developing situations with, Biden's vice president. Who he picks is going to be something we're going to be covering. Good or bad decisions. I want to keep looking at the Tara Reade story. I've done a lot of Tara Reade videos. I'll continue to do them. If new stuff comes out about Tara Reade or Joe Biden or things like that, I'll definitely be covering them. So, that's one thing. One thing, I don't post on a set schedule, because I sometimes make videos based on what's happening. And again, when my son was at daycare, I sort of had a roughly the same schedule every day. Like, I would take him to daycare, and he would sort of be there from 8 to 4. And then that would be my day of work. And then maybe I'd do some work at night too. But now it's whenever I get some time. And sometimes it's I have a lot of time, and sometimes I have no time. But one thing, again, I post videos almost every day. So even if you don't have the notification bell clicked, stop by the actual channel every day and you'll see a new video and check it out. Yeah, I mean, that's basically it. I try to also follow, what's happening in the news, on a given day, Sometimes I make a video that's a bit pulling back, where I talk about, something that I've been noticing over the past few weeks. And sometimes I make more of a reaction video. I made a video about Anderson Cooper when he interviewed the crazy Las Vegas mayor. And that video did very well. And it was just me sort of doing a quick reaction to the insanity about using Las Vegas as a test tube for COVID-19 by getting everybody sick with it and seeing what it does, and how that's something that I did a video on, and it did quite well. John Bartlett says, "Hey, what should the left's goal in America be?" Well, I mean, the goal should ultimately be to build a democratic socialist society where the means of production are owned by workers in a combination of worker, cooperative, and state ownership at the municipal, federal, and state levels. That should be the ultimate goal, but I think the American left's goal should be a mixture of things. I think, the left's goal has to be to ensure that there is a strong contingent of progressive Congress people that are pushing left-wing ideas, and say, even if Biden becomes president, that will fight Biden on the left. That's people like Tlaib, Omar, AOC. A lot of these people, they're not left enough for me all the time, but they're good, they're decent. I think municipal politics and state level politics have to be a goal. And I think ultimately, if you want to build the third party, if you want to meaningfully build the third party, or you want to meaningfully start to transform the Democratic Party, I think you need to put more people in the Senate. I think you need more people like Bernie. I don't know if you could target certain states that are really left wing but small and pump in resources. So let's say you could run a left wing Senate candidate in Hawaii or something. I don't know. to run on a left-wing platform, and because the state is small, the budget to run might not be too heavy, and so left-wingers from all over the country can pump money and volunteers in and basically help elect more left-wing senators. And I think like having a Bernie Sanders-style governor could really help as well. Like a real left-wing governor. It's going to be easier to do those things before winning the White House. It's going to be harder to win the White House. Koru says, have to go make dinner. Thank you for your political analysis. Koru, thank you so much. Maid of the Mist said, Christo, you do a great job. We need people of knowledge in politics like you to encourage the political conversation. Politics is all about compromise. Well, yeah, and I think it's a lot of it's about conversation and dialogue and having these things. Sean says, please do a video in the vein of your new Passage piece. Such a good read. Thank you, Sean. Certainly something I'm looking into. Again, as I've noted, we've made further developments in the new podcast I and another person are working on. Again, I don't want to list any official ideas yet, because if it breaks down, I don't want anyone to feel like they let anybody down or anything like that. But they are another YouTuber. People have asked. It's not David Dole, but they're another Canadian YouTuber, and we have a title that is a reference to an old CCF thing. So that's all I'm gonna say, and that's probably what we're doing, and that's going to be much more Canadian focused. John says, was there one good thing Trump did you agree with? Canceling the TPP. Now, Trump did it for the wrong reasons in a lot of ways, but canceling the TPP was a good thing, I think. Maybe that was one good thing Trump did. Whole lot of other stuff Trump didn't do that. Like, most of the stuff he's done, I haven't agreed with. Canceling the TPP was good. Carmen Internet, Christo, you should chat with Silver Spook, creator of NeoFeud. I don't know who that is. Let me see. NeoFeud. Oh, okay, yeah. Certainly, I mean, I'd be very interested. I haven't played the game yet, though. Let me see. Looks super fun. Looks interesting. Yeah, I'll certainly look that up. I am building like lists of people to talk to for my for various interviews, but it's just really hard right now. Everyone's being super crazy with coronavirus and things like that. It's hard to line people up. And on my end, like some days I people are like, let's do an interview, and then I'm like, I can't because it's like 3 p.m. and my son's up, and like I can't sit down for an hour and do an interview. So it's been challenging. It's been challenging to get everything done during this crisis. Trump didn't go to war with Iran, but he almost went to war with Iran, right? Like he almost did. Like it was close. And he did commit an act of war on Iran. Like let's be a little let's be clear here, right? Like he did, it got pretty tight there for 3 or 4 days. Kat saying they look forward to my videos. I really appreciate that. I'm glad you look forward to them. I very much like that people, enjoy the content and you can't wait to see it. It makes it, some days you're tired. It makes it easier to make it when people are excited to see it. Sean, yeah, I think the podcast will be a lot of fun. It'll be more Canadian focused. Some of the stuff will be done in a way to be like for Americans because a lot of my Americans want to learn more about Canada, a lot of the American audience. But it's like, I don't know if YouTube's always the best place for it because the Canadian scene is just really small and it's hard to grow a channel based off Canadian content. And I think a podcast might be a better venue for that, but it'll also include stuff for Canadians, like maybe some media criticism and things like that. So we're working through that. The person I'm working with, is obviously he's been dealing with the realities of the coronavirus on his professional life. So, we're a little bit slower than we expected, but it is something we're working on each and every week. We're inching forward on it. Today, Kate says, Today, while walking on Davie Street here in Vancouver, police took down a skinhead-type man who was hitting Asians with a very large Confederate flag. Yeah, that wouldn't surprise me. There's been a lot of violence in Canada, I assume in the United States as well, but maybe I'm wrong, against Asian Canadians because of COVID-19, where basically people are racially profiling anyone that looks Asian, even though they may have never been to China, even though they're not ethnically Chinese, anything like that, right? But the reality is, it's clearly just racism, right? It's clearly just racism. It's sad to see. Because, like, Italians, there's a lot of Italians that got the coronavirus too. And, like, I'm somebody that could plausibly look Italian, and no one's attacked me for my ethnicity regarding the coronavirus. So it's just anti-Asian racism. John Bartlett says, hey, I'm going to head out. John, it was great to have you here. Thank you for your support, your great questions and comments. See you next weekend and all the videos I make from now till then. Sanwal says, do we need more left nationalism like Sinn Féin? I mean, I think certain elements of left nationalism can be healthy. I think there are pitfalls to nationalism when it becomes about excluding people, when it becomes about anti-immigration. But I think in terms of building nationalism, a sense of like national solidarity, a sense of nationalism in like the people of the country owning their resources, exerting democratic control, rested not in the corporate institutions, but in the people. I think that form of left-wing nationalism can be quite helpful. And actually, in Canada, we have there's a long history of left-wing nationalism in the CCF NDP. There was the waffle. Unions often practice it. You still see it every now and then. But yeah, I think there are elements of left-wing nationalism that are very helpful, but we also have to be careful to not exclude people. And in a country like Canada, which is much more ethnically diverse than Ireland, how left-wing nationalism will play out will be different, and will have to be different than Sinn Féin. Because the countries are very different. Different in sizes, different in scopes, different in the ethnic and religious and linguistic and cultural diversity. It's a major issue. Lonnie says, you wrote a book. Tell us about it, bro. Yeah, I mean, I've done actually, there are 3 books where you can find me. The first, let me pull it up here. And I've done this before, so I won't waste people's time too much. I've talked about it. The first, this is my book, The Constant Liberal, Pierre Trudeau, Organized Labor, and the Canadian Social Democratic Left. It's written by me, Christo Aivalis. This was my PhD dissertation turned into a book. This is something that I worked a lot of years on, and you can get this book. You can buy it on websites. I think Amazon sells it. I know, don't buy Amazon, but you can go directly to the UBC Press and buy it. I think the University of Chicago handles U.S. distribution. This is the solo book I've written. I've also been published in. I did an introduction to this Winnipeg book, which is a history, a recollection of the leaders of the Winnipeg General Strike. And it was republished with a new introduction by me to set like the last 100 years of how the Winnipeg General Strike has been remembered in popular culture and by historians. So I just wrote a few, my thing here is like 5 pages long, 6 pages long, maybe 10 or so. But it's like a primary source about the strike leaders and how they handled the Winnipeg strike. And then finally, one second, get back. My bookcase is far too packed. And finally, this just came out a couple of days ago, but I wrote a chapter in this labor law textbook. Basically, it's a broad labor relations law and practice textbook. I think it's aimed at undergraduates who are studying labor relations. And I wrote a chapter here on the history and effect of the Wagner Act, or Wagner model, which is the way that unions are largely formed in Canada and the United States, and whether the Wagner model is good and or bad. So I kind of did a pro, like, it wasn't really a take a side type essay, it was more for students. So it's like, here are the main reasons for, here are the main reasons against. And I've published a lot of other things, but those are the 3 books that have been in. Actually, a 4th one right here. I wrote a chapter in this book called Party of Conscience. This is a book by 3, it was an edited collection by 3 left academics, all of them NDPers, all of them on the left in Canada. And they got us to write a series of chapters on the left. And here I wrote a chapter on the underappreciated socialism of the NDP in the 1970s. So that's the books I've been in. So sorry to take all those detours there, but Lonnie obliged. And I've been published in a lot of other sources, like digital sources, magazines, newspapers, things like that. But those are like the books I've been in. So that textbook, you guys aren't going to want a textbook, I don't assume. It's probably really expensive, I'm going to be honest. But the Party of Conscience book is available with Between the Lines. That press sells it. Lorimer is the one that does the Winnipeg General Strike book. You know, you can certainly see all of those things. Oh yes, Kate. Yes, I saw that. It's just been so crazy. I'm gonna definitely send you that, Kate. The dissertation. If you want the dissertation, which is slightly different than the book, and it is free, I have no problem sending it. Please send me an email, and you can get a copy of the dissertation. It's not available for download until so many years have passed, but I often give it to people who send me an email. And so if you want, you could send me an email and I'll send you a copy of the dissertation. So Kate, sorry about that. I did see that. It's just it got lost in my email and then I never caught up. So I will get that to you tonight. I promise you that as soon as the stream is done. But yes, if you want to get the book, you can order it there. It's also, I know it's a big ask, but if you are a $50 patron on the channel, it includes a free copy of my book, which is actually, it retails at like $35. So it's a pretty fancy book. Because academic books in Canada don't make money, so they have to sell them. Like my book didn't sell a whole lot of copies. It did okay for an academic book, but it's still a book written. It's not written for the chapters crowd as much. So like it doesn't really sell in a lot of bookstores. Like it sells in some university bookstores and some like left-wing stores have it, but most chapters Indigo stores, they don't carry it. Joe Biden getting excited for a new round of hair sniffing. Is there an electronic version of that book? Christopher, to my knowledge, all of the books should be digitally available. Let me just do a quick check. My book with UBC Press is available as an ebook. It is. And cheaper as an ebook as well. The Aivalis. The book on the Lorimer book on Winnipeg 1919, I believe is also available as an ebook and cheaper as well. I think it's $14.95 Canadian. The one with the Party of Conscience, let me check that. The Party of Conscience book with Between the Lines is it available digitally? I don't know if that one is available digitally. I'm not sure actually. Let me see. That one is not. That one is only available on paperback, I believe. But I might be wrong, but I can't find it off the top of my head. I don't, that's so they should all be, and the textbook I'm not sure, but again, I don't know if you guys are going to want a textbook. I assume it's only available as a text, but maybe I'm wrong. Maria says, what do you think of Joy Reid's suggestion of allegations of a plot against Biden to replace Bernie as the nominee? In general, I don't agree. I certainly think that a lot of Bernie people think that if Biden falls, Bernie could be there to become the nominee. And I certainly think that maybe some people are pushing this story in part because of that. But in general, I think this is a story because Tara Reade is credible and Joe Biden sexually assaulted Tara Reade. Like, that's what happened. And yeah, sure, maybe Bernie could become the nominee if Biden had to drop out. But I honestly believe, and I've said this, that while I do think if Biden has to drop out, the only just decision is to make Bernie the nominee, I honestly think at this point it's not even about Bernie. It's just about the fact that Biden can't be the nominee. And like, it should be Bernie, but like Biden, like it's like this is about more than Bernie. It's about the fundamental justice for Tara Reade and all the other women Biden hurt and all the women like them all around the world who are like, will any powerful man ever pay the price, right? So I don't buy that it's a conspiracy. There's a really good video, Maria. I don't know if you saw this, but maybe this is where you got the idea. But Mike Figueredo at the Humanist Report did a good video breaking down Joy Reid's conspiracy theory. So go check that out later tonight after the stream. Joseph, I don't want a textbook ever again. What's Bernie's being taken off the ballot again? What's going on here? Let me see. Okay, they're appealing the ruling. Okay, I haven't seen if it's formally happened yet, but it doesn't surprise me that they're appealing. I'll take a look into that. Steve says I have a lisp. I think I do have a bit of a lisp sometimes. No one has perfect speech. I think it comes out more when I've been speaking for a lot or when I'm talking very quickly because I get tripped over my words. So I think people are fine with it. People are fine with it. So yeah, I'm definitely looking into that Bernie story. We're gonna see. I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if he ultimately comes off again, but we'll see. Yes, I heard they're working on taking Bernie off the ballot. That's what I saw. Maria, that they are appealing, but now that appeal hasn't been heard yet. I'm not sure. Oh yeah, Carl, I agree with you, but I think like the argument is like that Carl's saying that if the DNC replace anybody with Biden with anybody but Bernie, it's a guaranteed win for Trump. I don't necessarily think it's 100%, but I think like it'll be a bad show. My point is that like this isn't about Bernie. It's about Tara Reade. It's not about Bernie. Like it isn't. Fundamentally, it's about Tara Reade and justice for Tara. Like that's my view. Al says your videos are top tier. Thanks for your work. Al, thanks for your support and the kind words. I very much appreciate that. All your guys' support tonight has been extremely generous. Very much so. Joseph said it's a slight lisp. Like, look, everyone's got speaking things. Like, I mean, look, sometimes I have like a gulp when I speak. I don't know why I do, but you'll notice sometimes I try to edit it out. But when I go for long times, I'll end up like doing that, for instance. I don't know if that's a speech impediment or things like that, but it's something that everybody has. With this type of content, with the type of videos I make, I try to put something out that's really polished and I think well informed, but I think people also want something that's like authentic, right? If you want somebody that can perfectly enunciate every syllable and read you the news off a teleprompter, then like you got that on CNN, MSNBC, Fox, ABC. But this channel, nothing is scripted. I mean, I've done scripted videos, but you know the difference. Like when I'm reading off a script, none of my videos are scripted. This is me, talking to you guys in a direct way. Sometimes I edit the videos for clarity, for conciseness. If I trip over my words, things like that. But this is me talking to you guys in a unfiltered way, and I think that's the kind of content I can deliver. Yeah, like I 100% believe Tara Reade. Like that's my view. That's right. Or like, can I be 100% certain? 99.9999999. I don't know. I believe Tara Reade. The point from my perspective is that it's not really about Bernie. Sure, if Biden was to just disappear off the face of the planet, is there anybody else that should be the nominee that wouldn't be a miscarriage of justice but Bernie? No. But it's not about Bernie. It's about Tara Reade. Homophone Production says, what do you think about socialism and communism? The idea that they can't be viable because they haven't worked in other countries. I mean, it depends what your definition of socialism, communism, and worked are. I mean, my general view is that socialism is something I believe in. That it, especially in terms of like the democratic socialist vision of a society in which the economy has been democratized through a combination of worker ownership, public ownership, and community ownership, with maybe some small independent businesses, very small businesses around, like independent contractors, tradespeople and things like that, who are basically 1 or 2 person operations that can work as independent people. And that, the necessities of life are provided as a basic human guarantee. No society is like that. Some societies in Scandinavia have gotten somewhat close. My general view is that it's difficult to say, have these societies not worked because the fundamental ideology is broken, or have they not worked because the powerful societies around them have been ideologically opposed to those visions? That's an interesting question. People might say capitalism, has that worked? And you might say, well, most of the rich, successful societies, they're capitalist societies. But I would say that the mythology of capitalism isn't just that it's about making people rich. The mythology of liberal democratic capitalism is that it's supposed to create not only wealth, but that it's supposed to create true equality of opportunity. That inequality is good, but it's only good because people earn the inequality they get. They earn it through working hard, or they earn it for being lazy. Right? The inequality was bad in the feudal era because there was a narrow class of people, by virtue of how they were born, who got most of all the privileges and wealth, and the rest of the people, by virtue of their birth, got very little. And capitalism was all about acknowledging that inequality is good if the game is fair. And capitalism has never, ever reproduced that. Never. Capitalism cannot. If you want functional equality of opportunity, you require near equality of condition. Every child needs to have the same basic material upbringings. Education must be fully free up until from pre-K to PhD. Every person must have their basic human needs met their entire life, or at least until they're an adult. And there needs to be maximum amounts of wealth, and there needs to be a 100% wealth tax to ensure that no wealth is passed on to fundamentally disrupt equality of opportunity. The mythos of that's not how capitalism is, but the mythos of capitalism and why we should all support it is fundamentally a lie. And you might say, well, that's not real capitalism, that's crony capitalism. Well, then you're making the same argument that like the people who say, well, that's not communism, that's state capitalism or whatever, right? Christo is Santa Claus. Well, like me, who I'm ethnically Greek. My father was born in Greece. Uh, uh, Family originates from Smyrna, but my dad grew up in Tripoli. Like Saint Nick, I am a Greek Orthodox person from the former Byzantine Empire, that area. So I guess you could say I have some kind of connection to Saint Nicholas. Steve M says political masturbation. Steve M is not very happy about this stream. Losers watch this, guys. Whose idiots are losers. Okay, see, again, Steve, the one thing I again say is that once you start making fun of people who watch the stream, I don't tolerate that. So I am going to put you on a timeout. Again, when you were making fun of me, distasteful as it was, I was fine with it. But you started calling my viewers idiots, and they're anything but. So we're going to put a stop to that. Well, exactly. None of us start at the same block. And look, there might always be inequality because there's genetic inequality. Not everyone's born with the same gifts, and not all gifts are valued the same, and everyone has different levels of luck. And so nothing will ever be truly equal, but certainly you can say that any society that allows some people to be born homeless or be born in a prison because their mother is in a prison has a fundamentally different level of income inequality or inequality of opportunity to the child born to a CEO or a president or even frankly just like a well-off person, like an upper middle class white person in the suburbs. Like not everyone has the same equality of opportunity. I mean, we get trolls. Mushroom Steve talking about the other Steve. Mushroom Steve is the best Steve, unless there's other Steves that are good, in which case they are equal to Mushroom Steve. But Steve M is now the worst Steve on this channel. But we get trolls every now and then. We got a lot of trolls during the Canadian election. A lot of PPC trolls came to our streams. And when we were doing post-debate streams, they'd be bigger because everyone was, it was like the story. These streams are more for my core audience. We would get a lot more trolls when the streams were a bit more general. Yeah, Maria, you're right, 100%. We should try our best to respect one another on this platform. I know sometimes you can't always do it, and some people are very cruel, and when we talk about the rich and powerful, we don't always need to show them respect. But when we're in this space, I want people to respect one another. People don't come to watch my stream to get called names, right? They don't do that. Yeah, and the Humanist Report is anti-capitalist. Yeah, like Mike's great. I really like him. He's a fan of my work. I'm a fan of his. He's really great. Choking on ashes. It's 3:33 here. Yeah, okay, yeah, it's getting pretty late. I mean, it's getting pretty late here as well. So I'll probably wrap up in a few minutes. But yeah, it's great to see you here at 3:33 a.m. I really appreciate that. That's great to see. Thank you. I do not think true equality is possible. Alexander the Great says, I do not think scientific or technological innovation would happen under socialism or communism. Well, yeah, it depends. What do you define as unacceptable inequality? What about a society where the richest person could only have an income 10 times higher than the poorest person or than the average person? So let's say in our society, the average person, let's say, makes $50,000 a year. I know it's probably a little bit lower than that, but that means the richest person can make $500,000 a year. Is that enough that there's still inequality and there's still the incentive, quote unquote, to work, but Um, but like, it's not so much inequality that it creates a system where you can use that wealth to fundamentally give future generations power that the children of poor people won't have, or that you use your wealth to distort the political, socio-political, and socio-economic process. You might also argue that in Cuba, for instance, because of the way the tourist industry works there, some cases are that people that work in the tourist industry make salaries higher or comparable to medical doctors in Cuba. And yet, a lot of people still want to be doctors. And not only does Cuba produce a lot of doctors, they produce very, very, very good doctors. Now, on a system where everyone supposedly innovated and strived only for economic benefit, you wouldn't spend all those years doing really hard studies. Like, I have a PhD. You don't do it for the money, right? It's hard work. And if Cuba, especially if doctors aren't getting rich, why would people be doctors if it was only about the money? And why would there be so many good quality doctors in Cuba? So many good doctors that they can export them around the world. So many good doctors that indigenous people in Canada wanted Cuban doctors to come to Canada to help them with the COVID-19 crisis, but the Canadian government had to block them because they didn't want to make Cuba look good. I'm not going to defend Cuba in its totality. Some of the things in Cuba are unacceptable. They have some infringements on civil liberties there. I don't agree with that. But if it's purely about economic incentives, I think Cuba proves some of those things wrong. People still want to be doctors, even though they can be richer doing quote unquote easier work. What does that mean, right? I don't know. Maria says, do you smoke marijuana, and what do you think of the war on drugs? I don't smoke marijuana. I don't use cannabis products personally. I never have. The drugs I enjoy are alcohol and a bit of caffeine through Diet Coke or Coke Zero. I don't drink coffee either. So that's basically it. But I've always been opposed to the war on drugs and always been in favor of legalization. The full decriminalization of all drugs, the legalization of probably most drugs. I'm concerned that some of them, at least right now, are maybe just so dangerous that maybe you shouldn't legalize them. But I think like nobody should ever go to jail for having or using drugs ever. You maybe get a debate about dealing some particularly dangerous drugs, maybe. But like the Portuguese model is something that's at least interesting. And Jagmeet Singh from the NDP supports a broad decriminalization policy, which is my party. So yeah, I'm against the war on drugs. It's racist, it's classist, it's hypocritical as fuck. Like we know, like it's awful. It's awful. It's awful. White people use drugs just as, like for marijuana alone, the data is there. White people and black people in the United States use marijuana actually on very similar, comparable rates. But black people are far more likely to be arrested for it and far more likely to face severe consequences when they do use it. So the war on drugs is awful. Lonnie's saying this is a great chat. Yeah, it's very good. The channel's always had a great chat group, even when our streams were more like 30 or 40 people. And I think like people have a lot of really good discussions. It's hard for me to see them all, but when Brianna's here co-hosting, she reads through them a lot. And she says she really enjoys seeing you guys talk about that. Yeah, the Canadian rollout of COVID. Look, like I've been very critical of the government. They left out the poorest Canadians from aid, and that was wrong. But in general, provinces, whether run by conservative liberals or NDP or Parti or the CAQ, have done a better job at coordinating. There hasn't been as many, there's no province in Canada that's been like, screw this, we're not closing anything. Or like, screw this, we're fully opening 6 weeks before everyone else does. That hasn't happened in Canada. AKKD says, Christo, are you a fan of The Hill? Would you say it's the most unbiased major American news source overall? I mean, if you're talking about the Hill publication, I'm not sure. I don't read like the website all that much. In terms of Crystal Ball and Sagar, I do watch now and then. I like some of their stuff. I'm actually a bigger fan of identity politics than they are. And I don't like the way they fully dismiss it. I think having a government that looks like the population is important. And I think that sometimes, like, the way they talk on that show is that it's wrong that Biden wants to have a female vice president. That's actually something I can agree with. I would have wanted Bernie on that debate night, where Bernie said he would likely pick a woman but didn't commit. Bernie should have committed to pick a woman too. I think it's perfectly reasonable to make that move. And you might say pick the most qualified person, but let's be real. In a country of 300 million people, and a country that's been around for more than 200 years, if it was about picking the most qualified people, then not every president, but one would have been a white man, and every single vice president ever has been a white man, right? Like, so I'm like, I don't agree with the way they approach it all the time, and I don't necessarily agree with some of Sagar's views. I agree that like certain parts of the woke left can do more harm than good, but I don't think it's wrong that we assert that the working class includes trans people, gay people, black people, indigenous people, and that their issues as trans people, gay people, black people, Hispanic people matter. Gay rights are working class rights. Women's rights are working class rights. Reproductive rights are working class rights. And I don't like this discourse of we're going to just shunt off everything but the economics and it's all identity politics. Majority of people who make minimum wage are women. Like, you know, pay equity, equal pay for equal work. Some people, like, they might call it identity politics. I think it's basic working class justice. So I don't agree with all of their framing. But, I mean, I think it's a decent show in a lot of ways. And I certainly watch it from time to time. And I feel that a lot of the people that are trying to cancel Crystal Ball are way off base in doing it. Yeah, see, I'm not a fan of Sagar. I get what the show is about, right? It's like you get an anti-establishment leftist in Crystal, you get an anti-establishment rightist in Sagar, and so they're like both outside the establishment. But is Sagar really outside of the establishment, or is he just another right-winger? Is he really anti-establishment? I don't know, right? Crystal Ball is definitely not something you normally see in most mainstream media. But, like, you might see somebody like Sagar on Fox News, you know? Like, I don't know. I don't, so it's something I watch, but it's not my favorite. Like, people I really like Michael Brooks, Mike Figueredo from the Humanist Report, like David Dole, like, don't always agree with them, but the Young Turks have some good sources. Like Nomiki Konst, she's good. Who else is really good? I like, who else do I watch pretty regularly? Also really like, on Canadian sources like Sandy and Nora are good sometimes, even though they're too anti-NDP for my taste. There's a lot of great sources out there on YouTube and other places that are fantastic. And I wouldn't put like the show Rising on the top of my list. Maybe it's because Sagar's there and I just disagree with them. Maybe it's the way Crystal Ball talks about identity politics, which bothers me sometimes, but it's good. I like her. Tim, oh yeah, I love Tim Black. Loved love so many of these sources, right? I love them all. Tim Black's really great. Love Ben Dixon. He does a great job. He's not really a YouTuber as much. Like Ben Dixon and Katie Halper are on YouTube, but they're more podcasters, right? They have YouTube channels, but the most of their audience is in the podcast scene. Like if you go to their channels, they get way less views than I do, but their podcasts are really big podcasts, right? Oh yeah, the Surfs, of course. They're like the Surfs. They're on YouTube. They're mostly streamers, but yeah, the Surfs are fantastic. There's a lot of great like left YouTubers. Less Politics. Novara Media is really good too. I was gonna say them. I was losing that in my mind here. Emma's really good. I know she was a Warren person, but I think she was genuine, and I like her a lot too. I think she does a good job. And it's important, right? Like, it's important that, like, a lot of the big names are just, like, kind of like, young-ish white European guys like me. And I do, again, whether that's I'm playing identity politics, it's like, I think it's important that not everyone look the same in, like, YouTube left media. That there are different perspectives. People from different backgrounds. Not just race and gender, but, like, not everyone should be, like I have a PhD, not everyone should be super highly educated talking about politics. Like that's not, identity politics includes class, right? Class is an identity, right? Harlan's Media is good. Beau of the Fifth Column, good people, Philosophy Tube, ContraPoints, H-Bomb, Step Back History, Mexi, Thought Slime. Those last three were Canadian. So many good sources. So many good. So many good. I don't know if it's public, guys. I can't see from, like, I don't know if this is public. Let me do an incognito thing here and go and look up this from, like, an incognito window to see if you guys can see it. But these are the channels that I am subscribed to. Some of them I haven't watched in years. But these are a lot of the if you go to my like channel list, you'll see a lot of the people I'm subscribed to. I don't watch all of them every day. Some of them I haven't watched in a long time, but you'll generally see a lot of the people that I like or that I at least keep tabs on because I think they're good, right? And so you can go check some of those channels out. Some of it's gaming content because I watch a lot of gaming content. Not always explicitly political, but you guys might like some of that stuff. Emma was a big Bernie person. So there was somebody who was a Warren person, or at least was sympathetic to Warren at the Young Turks. Who was it? There was somebody, and I remember it was really controversial. Maybe Emma wasn't. See, okay, so people are saying different things here. Okay, I'm mixing that up with somebody. Was there somebody at the Young Turks that was a Warren backer? Maybe I'm making a mistake there. You know what I mean? Yeah, David Pac-Man, okay, I know he's one of, like, the big names, and he's done a lot of good stuff, but, like, his takes on Venezuela and on Bolivia were awful. Awful takes. Like, mainstream media bad. His position on YouTubers unionizing, I made a video on this way back when my channel was really young, you can search this, was basically that he wouldn't want a YouTube union because it would make it harder for him, and he would only accept a YouTube union if it included channels his size or bigger. So at the time, he was at like 700,000 subs. So he wouldn't want to have a YouTube union with me or Mexi or David Dole or the Humanist Report or any of these people. He wouldn't want any of us in his union because we would be small fries to him. And ever since then, I've never really trusted David Pac-Man. I've never trusted him. Like, look, well, it's going to be hard to create a YouTube union in any case. But he was thinking just hypothetically, like, I'm too good to be in solidarity with small and even, like, not even just small YouTubers. Like, again, David Dole has like 250,000 subs. But to Pac-Man, he's like, oh, this guy's too small to matter to me. Right? So, yeah. Pac-Man on Bolivia was really bad. I haven't even seen his Israel takes, but I think I've seen some of that too. Ryan Grimm's really good. Does he do YouTube content? I know Ryan, he's done some stuff with Jacobin, I think, on their YouTube. But does he have his own channel? I know him more as a writer. I know Michael Brooks and Anna Kasparian are doing a show on Jacobin now. It doesn't get a ton of views yet. Because I don't know if a lot of people know to go see them on the Jacobin YouTube. But they're doing like a weekend show. And I think that's pretty cool. because they're two people that I think do a good job generally. Yeah, Peter Coffin, Ashley Coffin. I think I follow all three of them. And I know they do a podcast. That's a great shout out, Sean. That's a great shout out. Some more news is good. It's a bit more artistic. Like it's scripted. It's like it's well done. Some more news, which is like different than like just like my more unfiltered style. I didn't actually know Mexi had a podcast. I'm gonna check that out. Thank you for letting me know. Oh yeah, so see, people didn't necessarily. Okay, there's a lot of debate here. Okay, see, I don't even know. Okay, I'm confused. Okay, I don't want to. I'm not saying anybody was a Warren supporter when they weren't. I knew there was something with that at the Young Turks. So don't go mad at anybody. I don't want to slander anybody with such a horrible claim. You know. Yeah, Ryan Groove's a fantastic writer and journalist. He's one of the reasons him and Katie Halper, more than anyone, he broke the Tara Reade story. So they're fantastic. But I don't know too much about them. I don't know if he does like non-writing content. Yeah, the Jacobin channel's dangerously underviewed, I think. People don't know, I think, that they have a YouTube channel as much yet. Like, they have to do a better job promoting it. Because they have such a big audience, right? Some of my videos get more views than them. And that shouldn't be the case given how big Jacobin's readership is. Oh, Ryan Grimm does stuff for TYT. Yeah, okay, yeah. Yeah, Amy Goodman, yeah, it's almost like you don't mention her because she's too, like Democracy Now! Is like a take it for granted thing, right? Yeah, but yeah, of course, Democracy Now! is very good and should certainly be watched. Christo, what do you think about Jugmeat? I like Jugmeat. He's not left wing enough for me personally, but Jugmeat is way better than Tom Mulcair, our previous leader. And Jugmeat has shown he's willing to discuss things and have a discourse with the left in a way previous the last two or three last NDP leaders haven't. Like, for instance, like when he was giving out critic roles, he made Nikki Ashton, one of the more left-leaning MPs, he made her job to talk about nationalization and public ownership. That's Nikki's main job, is to explore how we can fight privatization and actually reverse privatization. And he gave her that job because he knew it was important to her, and he knew it was important to the party. And I think that's a sign, like Mulcair and Jack Layton would have never had that portfolio. And when Justin Trudeau created a fake minister for the middle class prosperity job, where even the minister herself couldn't explain what her job was, really, Jugmeat created a position for Charlie Angus, which was focused entirely on fighting inequality and precarity. So it's a position designed to focus on the needs of the most economically vulnerable Canadians. So that's a great sign. Jugmeat is still, again, he needs to go farther. In the last election, he should have said not just getting rid of student loan interest, but getting rid of student loans. He should have said not just capping internet prices, but be creating a national internet company. But it was a good campaign, and I do think the Jugmeat can grow into a great leader. I really do. That's my view. Not everyone agrees with me, but I think that he can grow into a great leader. He's only 41. Like, he's 40 or 41 right now. He's a young guy. He's got a lot of room to grow. Yeah, Mulcair was good at holding people to account, but his views in retrospect weren't that good. He was a good technical leader in the House of Commons. Like, he was good at the job of asking tough questions, getting that, like, putting the government on the back foot. Great leader of the opposition, horrible leader of a progressive party. Like, you would want someone like that in your party as like an attack dog, but I won't want him as my leader. Yeah, Ollie Thorne and Philosophy Tube. So many great left-wing sources. So guys, I think I'm going to wrap up a little bit. I said normally we go to about 10, but honestly, I was having so much fun, I sort of lost track of time. So I'm going to wrap up. Just a few things before I go. Again, I do these every Wednesday night at 8 o'clock Eastern time till usually anywhere from, I guess, 10 to 11, depending on the day. And we can talk about whatever's on your mind with politics of the left, anything else we could talk about. Normally I kind of went through reading the questions, but I actually like following you guys here and being a part of the conversation. I think that's a little bit easier for me, and I think it makes it a little bit more fun, frankly. What else? As I said before, I put up videos every day on the channel, usually multiple times per day. Check those videos out. If you want to see daily content. If you're not a subscriber, click subscribe. Most of you should be. But if you haven't clicked the bell, consider clicking that bell. It really helps drive people to the channel. And it really, because if you see the videos early, it helps drive more content. Lonnie says, Christo, you ever going to get back into politics again? I mean, I am in politics still. I've never stopped being in politics. But if you're asking if I'm going to run, I mean, I've considered it. I've never made a commitment, but I'm not saying never. You might see me run for the NDP someday, depending on if I can, if it's the right time in my life for me, for my wife, for my son, and all the other things you have to consider. But I'm not saying no. I'm not saying no. So guys, thanks so much. Yeah, and for this great discussion. I think this was fantastic. All the great comments. Check out all of those. Towards the end here, we talked about a lot of good left-wing YouTubers, podcasters, writers. Be sure to check them out. I mean, you might not like all of them. Maybe less for ideology, but some do like news and some do more like avant-garde videos. But do check them out because I know you'll like at least some of them. And if you see them, tell them I sent you. Okay, guys? Have a good one. No, don't worry about it, Joseph. It was great. I think it's, everyone has a certain way of speaking, and I know you were just trying to say that you don't mind. Okay, so guys, have a great one. I will see you next week, and I will have up videos every day from now until then. Have a good one, guys. Thanks.